Picture yourself standing on a pile of broken armor and shattered bones, the acrid smoke of burning wreckage stinging what passes for your nostrils. Your massive power claw still drips with the blood of the enemy champion you just crushed into paste. Around you, thousands upon thousands of green-skinned warriors roar their approval, their voices combining into a thunderous cacophony that shakes the very air. You are 10 feet of solid muscle, scarred flesh, and pure aggression. You are the biggest, the meanest, and the greenest. You are a warboss, and in this moment, as your boys surge forward to tear apart what remains of the enemy forces, you are the closest thing to a god that walks among the orcs. This is not leadership as other species understand it. There are no strategy meetings, no supply chains to manage, no diplomatic negotiations with neighboring powers. You don't earn your position through political maneuvering or inherited bloodlines. You don't maintain it through charisma or administrative competence. You are the boss because you are strong enough to beat anyone who says otherwise. You hold your position because every single morning you wake up ready to prove that you deserve it. And every single night you go to sleep knowing that tomorrow might be the day someone bigger and meaner takes it all away from you. The life of an orc warboss is violence distilled into its purest form. It is the simplest possible hierarchy taken to its logical extreme. It is brutal, it is bloody, and it is exactly what the orcs were designed for by the ancient old ones millions of years ago. Where other races complicate leadership with concepts like legitimacy, succession, and governance, orcs reduce it to the most fundamental truth in the universe. The strong rule, the weak follow. And if you don't like it, try and do something about it. In the grim darkness of the far future, orc warbosses are some of the most feared and destructive forces in the galaxy. They have brought entire sectors to their knees, turned thriving worlds into smoldering ruins, and killed countless billions in the name of nothing more complex than having a good fight. They are the architects of devastation on a scale that makes planetary governors wake up screaming. They command forces that can overwhelm Space Marine chapters, drown Imperial Guard regiments in green tides of violence, and laugh in the face of almost certain death. But what does it actually feel like to be one of these monsters? What goes through the mind of a being whose entire existence revolves around fighting, killing, and proving dominance? How does an orc warboss navigate the brutal politics of greenskin society, where betrayal is expected and loyalty lasts only as long as you can enforce it? What drives them forward? What threatens them? And what makes them the terrifying force that keeps the Imperium's generals up at night? To understand the life of a warboss, you must first abandon almost everything you think you know about leadership. Forget strategy in the human sense. Forget logistics, morale management, and long-term planning. The orc approach to command is primal, instinctive, and utterly alien to how other species organize themselves. Yet it works, catastrophically well, producing war machines that can match and sometimes exceed anything the Imperium can field, all cobbled together from scrap and belief. The role of a warboss combines supreme military commander, absolute dictator, celebrity champion, and religious icon all rolled into one massive, violent package. You are expected to be the best fighter in your entire tribe, the loudest voice in any argument, the first into every battle, and the last standing when everyone else has fallen. You must be cunning enough to outthink your enemies, but brutal enough that no one mistakes your intelligence for weakness. You must inspire absolute terror in your subordinates, while simultaneously earning their fierce, if temporary, loyalty. Every decision you make is enforced not through laws or regulations, but through the immediate threat of physical violence. Your authority extends exactly as far as your ability to beat anyone who challenges it. Your strategies are followed because your boys believe you'll lead them to the best fights. And the moment they stop believing that, you'll find yourself fighting for your life against your own knobs. This is leadership without safety nets, without institutional support, without anything except your own strength, cunning, and the raw, brutal charisma that comes from being the biggest and meanest git around. In the endless conflicts that rage across the Warhammer 40,000 universe, orc warbosses represent a unique form of terror. They are not like the cold, calculating Necron overlords who wage war with ancient technology and emotionless efficiency. They are not like the Chaos Lords, who seek dark power and cosmic domination. They are not like the tyrannid hive tyrants who are merely extensions of a greater consciousness. An orc warboss is a force of nature, a walking catastrophe who fights because fighting is what he was made to do, and who leads because he's too strong for anyone to stop him. This is a journey into the green-skinned nightmare. This is the life of constant battle, perpetual challenge, and unending violence. This is what it means to command the green tide, to hear the roar of thousands of orcs all looking to you for their next fight. This is what it's like to be a warboss in Warhammer 40K, and by the time we're done, you'll understand why these brutal monsters are one of the most dangerous threats in the galaxy. The road to power. From boy to boss, your story doesn't begin as a warboss. No orc springs fully formed from the ground wearing mega armor and wielding a power claw. Every warboss starts the same way. As a boy, one more green face in a mob of identical killers. You emerge from the fungal spores in the ground, already knowing instinctively how to fight, how to speak the orc language, and what a good scrap looks like. The genetic programming, installed by the old ones millions of years ago, kicks in immediately. You don't need parents, education, or training. You are born ready to kill. But you are not born special. Look around at your fellow orcs, and every single one of them has the same thought flickering through their primitive consciousness. They want to be bigger. They want more fights. They want better weapons. They want respect, or at least the orc version of it, which usually involves other orcs being too scared to steal your stuff. You are no different, except in one crucial way that you don't even fully understand yet. You have potential. Something in your genetic code, some quirk of the spore that birthed you, means you can grow bigger than your peers. The first step on the road to becoming a warboss is deceptively simple. Survive. Orc society operates on pure Darwinian principles. The weak get killed, either by enemies or by other orcs who want their gear. The strong get stronger. Every fight you survive makes you a little bit bigger, a little bit tougher. It's not metaphorical. Orcs literally grow in size and muscle mass as they accumulate victories. The Gestalt psychic field that all orcs generate responds to success, rewarding winners with physical growth. It's evolution on fast forward, shaped by psychic energy and brutal selection pressure. Your early battles are dirty, chaotic melees, where survival depends more on viciousness than skill. You fight over scraps of food, over weapons, over insults that you barely understand but instinctively know require violence as a response. You learn quickly that hesitation gets you killed. The orc who strikes first, who hits hardest, who keeps hitting until the enemy stops moving. That's the orc who walks away. You develop a fighting style out of pure necessity, discovering that your right hook can shatter jaws or that you're unusually good at spotting when an enemy is about to attack. As you grow, you start to stand out. You're not just surviving anymore, you're winning. Other orcs notice. Some start following you because you seem to find the best fights. Others challenge you because they're jealous of your success. Each challenge is a test, and each test you pass makes you bigger, stronger, more confident. The orc hierarchy is absolutely ruthless in its clarity. If you beat someone, you're better than them. If they beat you, you're dead or you run away, and running away just means you get to try again later. Eventually, you kill your first knob. This is the watershed moment, the point where you go from being just another boy to being someone with real potential. Knobs are the middle management of orc society, bigger and meaner than regular orcs, usually decked out in better armor and wielding fancier weapons. They're the enforcers who keep the regular boys in line through liberal application of violence. Killing one marks you as special. Maybe it happens in a proper challenge, a formalized brawl where the winner takes everything. More likely, it's opportunistic, a moment when the knob is distracted or wounded, and you see your chance and take it. The dead knob's gear becomes yours. Maybe it's a power claw that crackles with energy, or a shooter that fires more reliably than the rusted piece of junk you'd been carrying. Whatever it is, it's better than what you had, and more importantly, it's a trophy. You parade around with it, making sure every other orc sees what you took from a warrior who was bigger than you. Some orcs start calling you boss, a term of respect in their brutish language. It feels good, and more than that, it feels right. From here, the snowball effect takes over. Success breeds success in orc society because of the gestalt field. As you win more fights, you grow larger. As you grow larger, you can win bigger fights. As you win bigger fights, more orcs want to follow you, because following a winner means better loot and better scraps. Your mob grows from a handful of orcs to dozens, then hundreds. You're not consciously trying to become a warboss at this point. You're just doing what comes naturally. Fighting because it's fun, winning because the alternative is death, and accumulating power because that's what successful orcs do. But the real turning point comes when you challenge an actual warboss. This is where your ambition meets reality. Maybe you've been serving under this warboss for years, watching him make decisions you think are stupid, seeing him take the best loot for himself, growing increasingly frustrated that you're doing most of the work while he gets most of the glory. Maybe you're confident enough that you think you can take him. Maybe you're just so filled with aggressive energy that you can't help yourself. Whatever the reason, you issue the challenge. The fight that follows is unlike anything you've experienced before. A warboss didn't get where he is by luck. He's survived hundreds of challenges from ambitious knobs and rival warbosses. He's bigger than you, more experienced than you, and he's equipped with the finest weapons and armor that his mech boys can provide. He hits like a freight train wrapped in spikes. His power claw could tear you in half. His roar alone makes lesser orcs flinch, but you have advantages he might not recognize. You're younger, faster, hungrier. You haven't spent years feasting and getting fat on your success. You have something to prove and nothing to lose. The fight is savage, brutal, and absolutely primal. You trade blows that would kill lesser beings. His power claw catches you in the side, and you feel ribs crack, but you ignore the pain and drive your chopper into the gap in his armor. He headbutts you hard enough to see stars, but you bite his ear off and spit it in his face. The moment of truth comes suddenly. You see an opening. Maybe he's getting tired, his defenses dropping for just a second. Maybe he overextends on an attack, leaving himself vulnerable. You don't think. You react. Your weapon finds its mark, and the warboss, the monster who seemed invincible just moments ago, goes down. The watching crowd of orcs goes silent for a heartbeat, and then erupts into chaos. This is the most dangerous moment. You're wounded, exhausted, and now every ambitious knob in the mob is looking at you and wondering if they can take you while you're weak. You don't have time to rest. You immediately start roaring challenges at the crowd, daring anyone else to try their luck. You make a show of taking the dead warboss's gear, his weapons, his trophies. You plant your foot on his corpse and bellow that you're the boss now, and anyone who doesn't like it can come and do something about it. Several try. You kill them all. It's exhausting, painful, and absolutely necessary. By the time the challenges stop coming, you're barely standing, covered in your own blood and the blood of at least half a dozen rivals. But you're standing, and everyone else who challenged you is on the ground. The message is clear. You are the biggest, the meanest, and the new boss. Anyone who missed the message the first time can get it firsthand if they'd like to volunteer. The transformation is immediate. Overnight, you go from being a particularly successful knob to being the supreme authority in your tribe. Orcs, who were your equals yesterday, now defer to you. The best food is yours. The finest weapons are yours. The most impressive trophies are yours. 132,000. 132,000. When you speak, other orcs listen, not because what you're saying is particularly wise, but because they know what happens to orcs who don't listen. Your first actions as a new warboss set the tone for your rule. You need to prove you're not just strong but smart. Maybe you order a raid on a nearby human settlement, showing your boys that you can find them good fights. Maybe you challenge a rival tribe, proving your leadership by leading your orcs to victory. Maybe you just start cracking heads among your own boys. establishing through pure violence that your word is law and disobedience means death. The story of Ghazghkull Thraka illustrates this journey perfectly. He started as a lowly boy in the armies on the planet Urk, completely unremarkable except for one detail: a bolt round from a space marine raid that destroyed 30% of his skull and pulped a good portion of his brain. The notorious pain boy Mad Doc Grotznik found him and rebuilt his skull with adamantium. Somehow, this injury activated Ghazghkull's latent psychic powers, and he began claiming that the Orc gods, Gork and Mork, spoke to him directly. Whether or not the gods actually communicated with him is irrelevant. What matters is that Ghazghkull believed it, and his belief made him powerful. Within 6 years of his injury, he had risen from lowly boy to warboss of his tribe. He did this through a combination of unusual cunning for an orc and the standard application of overwhelming violence. When the sun of Urk began to die and a massive space hulk appeared in orbit, Ghazghkull saw his opportunity. He subjugated the other tribes on Urk, united them under his banner, and led them onto the hulk. This is the path every warboss walks, though few walk it as far as Ghazghkull eventually would. You start as nothing, fight your way to becoming something, and if you're strong enough, cunning enough, and lucky enough, you become the boss. It's that simple, and that brutal. There's no academy for warboss training, no mentorship program, no apprenticeship. You learn by doing, and if you do it wrong, you die. It's natural selection operating at maximum efficiency, ensuring that only the strongest, meanest, and most capable orcs rise to the top. And once you reach that top, once you're standing on the corpse of the previous boss and the other orcs are bellowing your name, you realize something crucial. Getting there was the easy part. Now you have to stay there. And staying there is a job that never, ever ends. The weight of command. Daily life. As a warboss. Morning breaks over your encampment. Though calling it morning is generous, time doesn't mean much to orcs. You wake when you wake, usually because some idiot knob decided to start a fight too close to your quarters and the noise disturbed your sleep. Sleep itself is a strange experience for an orc. You don't need as much as other species, and what sleep you do get is restless, filled with dreams of violence and conquest. You dream about the fights you've won and the fights you're planning to win. If orcs understood psychoanalysis, which they absolutely don't, they'd say your subconscious is exactly as violent as your conscious mind. You roll out of whatever passes for your bed. Maybe it's a pile of enemy banners you've collected. Maybe it's just a corner of your command vehicle where you've thrown some looted cushions. Maybe it's literally just the ground, because you're too tough to need anything softer. Your body aches from yesterday's fights, yesterday's challenges, yesterday's everything. Being a warboss means you're constantly getting injured, and even though orc physiology allows you to heal at remarkable rates, you still accumulate damage faster than you can recover from it. The first thing you do is check your weapons. Your power claw crackles with energy as you flex the mechanical fingers, making sure the pneumatic systems are still working after you used it to crush that particularly annoying knob's head yesterday. Your shooter needs cleaning, though orcs use the term cleaning loosely. You basically hit it a few times with a hammer, clear any particularly large obstructions from the barrel, and hope it doesn't explode in your face the next time you pull the trigger. Your chopper is fine. Choppers are always fine. They're lumps of sharpened metal. As long as it's sharp enough to cut and heavy enough to bludgeon, it works. Your quarters are a monument to violence. Every surface is covered with trophies from your victories. Human skulls, Xenos helmets, enemy banners, spent shell casings, broken weapons from defeated foes. Each one represents a battle won, an enemy killed, a moment of triumph. You don't keep them because you're sentimental. Orcs aren't sentimental. You keep them because they're proof. Every orc who sees your collection knows immediately that you're not just strong, you're proven. You've killed so many enemies that you've run out of room to display all the evidence. The first challenge of the day arrives before you've even finished checking your gear. A young knob, full of ambition and stupidity, demands the right to challenge you for leadership. This happens almost every day, sometimes multiple times. It's the price of being the boss. Every orc with an ounce of ambition looks at you and thinks, I could take him. Most of them are wrong, but that doesn't stop them from trying. You size up the challenger. He's big, but not as big as you. He's got decent weapons, but not as good as yours. He's confident, but he doesn't have the scars that come from decades of fighting. You could probably kill him in your sleep, but that's not the point. The point is making an example. You accept the challenge because refusing would show weakness, and weakness is death in orc society. The fight is brutal but brief. You let him get in a few hits, just to make it look fair, just to give the watching crowd some entertainment. Then you end it. Your power claw closes around his throat, and you lift him off the ground while he struggles uselessly. You look around at the assembled orcs, making eye contact with each nob, each potential challenger, making sure they all see what happens to orcs who think they can take your position. Then you squeeze, and the challenger's life ends with a wet crunch. You drop the body and bellow a challenge to the crowd. Anyone else? The watching orcs roar their approval, but no one steps forward. Good. That means you can get on with your day. You kick the corpse towards some nearby Gretchen and order them to dispose of it. Maybe they'll eat it. Maybe they'll leave it for the squigs. You don't care. Dead orcs are somebody else's problem. Breakfast, such as it is, consists of whatever your boys managed to loot yesterday. Maybe it's rations taken from a human convoy. Maybe it's some alien creature that one of your hunting parties killed. Maybe it's fungus beer, which is technically food if you're an orc. You don't eat alone. Your nobs gather around, the toughest and most successful orcs in your tribe, and together you feast and brag about yesterday's victories. This is when the important business of the day gets done, not through formal meetings or structured discussion, but through the chaotic, aggressive conversation that passes for orc planning. One of your nobs mentions that scouts spotted a human settlement 3 days' march away. Another says he heard rumors of good loot at an Imperial Guard depot. A third complains that the tribe hasn't had a proper fight in almost a week, and the boys are getting restless. You listen to all of it, processing information in a way that looks random, but is actually surprisingly effective. Orcs have a kind of cunning intelligence that shouldn't work but does. You weigh the options. The human settlement is close, which means easy access, but it probably doesn't have much worth looting. The Imperial Guard depot is farther, but has better potential rewards. The restlessness among your boys is a real problem because bored orcs start fighting each other, and while that's normal, too much internal fighting weakens your tribe. You make your decision the way orc warbosses always make decisions, loudly and with absolute confidence. We's gonna hit de guard place. You bellow. Get de boys ready. We move when I say so and not before. Any git who starts fighting before I give de word gets fed to de squigs. The nobs roar their approval and scatter to organize their mobs. You don't micromanage. That's not how orc leadership works. You give the broad strokes, and your nobs handle the details. If they do it wrong, you hit them. If they do it really wrong, you kill them and promote someone else. It's a simple system, and it works remarkably well for a species that should theoretically fall apart from internal conflict. The rest of your morning is spent making your presence known throughout the camp. You walk among your boys, looking for problems. 2 orcs fighting over a weapon. You settle it by taking the weapon for yourself. A mech boy complaining that he doesn't have enough scrap to build a new war track. You tell him to loot better or build smaller. A grot getting too uppity with one of your boys. You kick it across the camp and laugh when it squeals. You also take time to visit your mech boys' workshops. These are crucial parts of your war machine, the places where ramshackle orc technology somehow manages to function despite violating most known laws of physics. The big mech in charge of your equipment shows you his latest creation, a new rocket that's supposed to fly further and explode bigger than the old ones. You watch a test firing, which goes about as well as orc technology usually does. The rocket flies 10 feet, explodes prematurely, and kills 3 Gretchen who were standing too close. The big mech declares it a success and promises to build more. You agree, because by orc standards, anything that explodes is working as intended. Afternoon involves more challenges. Always more challenges. Being a warboss means you're constantly being tested, not just by your own orcs, but by rival warbosses who think they can take your position or your territory. Sometimes these are formal challenges, announced with all the ceremony orcs can manage, which isn't much. Other times they're surprise attacks, ambitious knobs trying to catch you unaware. You've survived all of them so far, which is the only reason you're still alive. You spend some time showing off your trophies to visiting orcs from other tribes. This isn't vanity, this is diplomacy, orc style. When a warboss from another tribe comes to negotiate, he judges your strength based on what he can see. Your trophies, your scars, your gear, your boys, all of it factors into his assessment of whether he should cooperate with you, attack you, or just stay out of your way. You make sure he sees your best trophies, the helmets of space marines you've killed, the banner of an Imperial Guard regiment you destroyed, the skull of a particularly large Xenos creature. As evening approaches, you hold court in your command hall, a designation that makes it sound far more organized than it actually is. It's basically a large space where you sit in the biggest chair, surrounded by your most trusted knobs, while other orcs come to you with problems, complaints, or requests. An orc comes forward asking permission to hunt in another tribe's territory. You grant it, because you don't care about tribal boundaries, and starting fights with neighbors is always fun. A mech wants resources to build a larger gun. You tell him to figure it out himself. A knob reports that some of the boys have been looting your personal stockpile. You immediately order those boys brought before you and beat them until they can't stand, then order them to go fight at the front of the next battle. It's both punishment and reward. They get beaten for stealing, but they also get to be first into the fight. As night falls, you retreat to your quarters, but you don't sleep immediately. You're an orc, which means you're always ready for violence, and nighttime is when ambitious orcs are most likely to try something stupid. You keep your weapons close, your senses alert for the sound of approaching footsteps. You've had knobs try to kill you in your sleep before. You've killed them all, obviously, but it means you never fully relax. Before sleep claims you, you think about tomorrow. There's the raid on the Imperial Guard depot to plan. There are reports of a rival warboss getting too big for his boots, which might require a proper fight to sort out. There are rumors of good scraps happening in nearby systems, which might be worth investigating. But mostly, you think about fighting, because that's what orcs do. That's what you are. You're not an administrator or a politician. You're a weapon wrapped in muscle and bad attitude, pointed at anything that looks like it needs killing. This is your daily existence. It's violent, chaotic, and exhausting, but you wouldn't want it any other way, because you're not just surviving, you're thriving. Every day you wake up still in charge is a day you've won. Every challenge you survive makes you stronger. Every fight you win adds to your legend. You're not building a civilization or creating a legacy. You're not leaving the galaxy better than you found it. You're just fighting, winning, and staying on top through pure force of will and overwhelming violence. And in the grim darkness of the far future, for an orc warboss, that's exactly what life is supposed to be. The green aura, understanding the gestalt field. Something happens when orcs gather together. It's not visible to the naked eye, at least not to most species. It's not audible, though sensitive psychers can sometimes hear it as a kind of background roar. It's a pressure in the warp, a collective psychic presence that grows stronger with every orc that joins the mob. Humans call it the Gestalt field. Eldar have fancier names that involve far too many syllables. Orcs don't call it anything at all. They just feel it. An energy that flows through them when they're surrounded by their own kind, making them stronger, tougher, more confident. As a warboss, you are the focal point of this energy. When thousands of orcs look to you for leadership, their collective psychic presence doesn't just affect them, it affects you. Their belief in your strength literally makes you stronger. Their confidence in your leadership makes you more capable. The Gestalt field responds to success, rewarding winners with actual physical growth and enhanced abilities. This is why warbosses are so much larger than regular orcs. It's not just genetics or good nutrition. It's psychic energy made manifest in muscle and bone. The effect is cumulative and self-reinforcing. Every victory you achieve makes you a little bit bigger. Every fight you win adds to your legend, which makes other orcs believe in you more strongly, which feeds more energy into you through the Gestalt field, which makes you even bigger and stronger. It's a feedback loop that produces the massive, terrifying monsters that can grow to 10 feet tall and weigh several hundred pounds of pure muscle. Your growth isn't unlimited. There are physical and psychic constraints, but within those constraints, success breeds success in the most literal possible way. But the Gestalt field does more than just make you bigger. It affects your mind as well. Orcs have a kind of instinctive knowledge that they shouldn't possess. You know how to use weapons you've never trained with. You understand tactics that no one ever taught you. You can organize hundreds or thousands of orcs into a relatively coherent fighting force despite having no formal military training. This knowledge comes from the Gestalt field, drawing on the collective experience of every orc who's ever lived, and filtering it into your consciousness as instinct and intuition. The most obvious manifestation of the Gestalt field is what it does to orc technology. Orc weapons and vehicles should not work. They're cobbled together from scrap metal, spare parts, and whatever else the mechs can find lying around. They violate basic principles of engineering. They have components that don't fit together properly. They use ammunition that's often barely more than bits of metal stuffed into crude cartridges. By any logical standard, they should explode or fall apart the moment someone tries to use them. But they don't. They work because orcs believe they work. The Gestalt field, responding to that collective belief, makes them work. It's not that orc technology is literally held together by psychic energy. Imperial scientists who've studied captured orc weapons have found that they're crude but functional. But the Gestalt field smooths over the rough edges, compensates for design flaws, and allows devices that should barely function to operate with terrifying effectiveness. A shooter might be a rusted pile of barely connected parts, but when an orc pulls the trigger, the Gestalt field ensures that those parts work together long enough to fire the bullet. This creates some interesting effects. Orcs believe that painting their vehicles red makes them go faster, and in a universe where psychic energy can affect reality, that belief actually works. Red orc vehicles do go faster, not because the paint has any physical properties, but because the orcs believe it should, and the Gestalt field makes that belief real. Yellow makes bigger explosions. Blue is lucky. These color associations are baked into orc culture, and the Gestalt field enforces them as reality. As a warboss, you're acutely aware of these effects, even if you don't understand the mechanism behind them. You know that surrounding yourself with confident, successful orcs makes you feel stronger. You know that after a major victory, you can do things that would have been impossible before. You know that when your boys are roaring your name and surging forward into battle, you feel almost invincible. You don't think of it in terms of psychic energy or Gestalt fields. You just know that having lots of orcs who believe in you makes everything better. This is why the size of your mob matters so much. A warboss leading 100 orcs is dangerous. A warboss leading 10,000 orcs is apocalyptic. The Gestalt field grows exponentially with numbers. When enough orcs gather together, their collective psychic presence becomes so powerful that it starts affecting reality in noticeable ways. Mech boys find themselves able to build weapons and vehicles that should be impossible. Orcs become tougher, stronger, more resilient. The entire mob starts operating as a coherent whole, moving with a unity that seems impossible for such a chaotic species. This is also why the Great Crusades called Green Crusades are so devastating. When a particularly successful warboss manages to unite multiple tribes under his banner, the resulting psychic pressure from tens of thousands or even millions of orcs creates a kind of psychic storm. This storm is visible to psychers as a green wave of raw energy, hence the name. It draws in more orcs from across entire sectors of space, all pulled by the irresistible psychic call of a truly massive gathering of their kind. The crusade becomes self-sustaining, growing larger as it attracts more orcs, creating more psychic pressure, which attracts even more orcs in an endless cycle. As the leader of such a crusade, you become something more than just a war boss. You become a living legend, a figure of mythic proportions who embodies everything orcs aspire to be. The Gestalt field pours into you with overwhelming force, making you grow to truly massive proportions. Gazkul Thraka, the most successful war boss of the 41st Millennium, grew so large from his victories that he barely fit in standard orc armor. He had to have custom mega armor built just to contain his massive frame. This wasn't aging or disease making him bigger. This was success, made manifest in flesh and bone. But the Gestalt field isn't always beneficial. It can also be dangerous, especially to certain types of orcs. Weird boys, the rare orcs born with active psychic powers, act as living lightning rods for this energy. They absorb the psychic emissions of nearby orcs unconsciously, and when they're around large groups, the pressure builds up inside them like water behind a dam. If they don't release this energy regularly, their heads literally explode, often taking the heads of nearby orcs with them in a chain reaction of psychic detonation. As a warboss, you need to be careful with your weird boys. They're incredibly useful as psychic weapons, capable of hurling bolts of green energy that can melt tanks or calling down psychic lightning that fries entire squads. But they're also dangerous to keep around because they're constantly on the edge of catastrophic overload. You typically keep them at a slight distance from the main mob, close enough to be useful, but far enough away that if they explode, they don't take out anyone important. The Gestalt field also affects how orcs recognize hierarchy. There's no formal rank structure in orc society. No one hands out promotions or assigns positions based on merit. Instead, orcs simply look at each other and instinctively know who's bigger, who's more successful, who's in charge. This knowledge comes from the Gestalt field. It reads the psychic signature of each orc, measuring their accumulated victories and comparing them to everyone else. The result is an automatic, unconscious hierarchy where every orc knows exactly where they stand in relation to every other orc. This is why challenges for leadership work the way they do. When a challenger faces a war boss, it's not just a physical fight, it's a psychic contest as well. The Gestalt field watches, weighs, measures. If the challenger wins, the field immediately recognizes the new hierarchy. Other orcs don't need to be told who won, they just know. The psychic pressure shifts, flowing toward the victor and away from the defeated. It's automatic, instinctive, and absolute. You feel this every time you win a fight. There's a moment after victory when you can sense the Gestalt field responding, acknowledging your success, feeding you energy and reward for your triumph. It's addictive in a way that goes beyond simple pride or satisfaction. It's a fundamental affirmation of your existence, proof written into the fabric of reality that you are what you claim to be, the biggest, the meanest, the boss. This is also why losing fights is so catastrophic for a war boss. It's not just that defeat damages your reputation or makes you look weak, it's that the Gestalt field itself turns against you. Other orcs sense the shift in psychic energy, the flow changing direction, moving toward whoever defeated you. Your authority doesn't gradually erode. It collapses all at once as the Gestalt field withdraws its support. This is why beaten war bosses are usually killed within hours of their defeat. The psychic pressure that kept them in power vanishes, and without it, they're just another big orc that someone else can take down. The Gestalt field is the invisible force that makes orc society function despite its apparent chaos. It's the reason why orcs can organize into effective fighting forces despite having no formal command structure. It's why orc technology works despite all logic. It's why war bosses can grow to enormous size and strength. And it's why, when enough orcs gather together for a truly massive crusade, they become one of the most dangerous forces in the galaxy. A green tide, powered by collective belief and psychic energy that can overwhelm almost any defense. Understanding the Gestalt field, even in the instinctive, non-intellectual way that orcs understand it, is crucial to being an effective war boss. You need to know how to use it, how to position yourself at the center of it, how to draw on its power and direct it toward your goals. You need to understand that your strength comes not just from your own muscles and weapons, but from the collective psychic energy of every orc under your command. You are the focal point, the lens through which that energy focuses and manifests. And when you stand at the head of thousands of roaring orcs, feeling their collective energy flowing through you, making you stronger and faster and tougher than you have any right to be, you understand in your bones why you fight so hard to maintain your position. Because being a warboss isn't just about political power or material wealth. It's about standing at the center of a psychic storm, channeling the raw, violent energy of your entire species, and using it to tear apart everything that stands in your way. It's about being more than just an orc. It's about being the orc, the one all the others look to, the one who embodies everything they are and want to be. And that feeling, that surge of power and purpose and absolute confidence, that's what makes all the challenges, all the fights, all the constant violence worth it. Because when you're standing in the middle of that green psychic storm, you're not just alive, you're truly living. Command and control. Managing the green horde. Leading orcs is like trying to direct a rock slide. You can influence the direction. You can maybe speed it up or slow it down a little. But ultimately, it's going where it wants to go, and everything in its path is getting crushed. The trick isn't to control every detail. The trick is to point the rock slide at your enemies and make sure your boys understand that fighting each other too much means they don't get to fight the actual enemy. And orcs who miss out on good fights have a tendency to get angry and start fighting you instead. Your primary tool for managing your horde is volume. Orcs respect loud. The orc who can roar the loudest is demonstrating strength, confidence, and authority. When you want something done, you don't send a messenger or write a memo. You bellow orders at the top of your lungs, making sure every orc within earshot knows exactly what you want. Your voice carries across the entire camp, a thunderous boom that makes smaller orcs flinch and alerts everyone that the boss has something to say. The content of your orders is usually pretty simple. We's gonna fight de humies. Get de trucks ready. Stop fighting each other and fight them instead. Orcs don't do subtle. They don't do nuance. They respond to direct commands, delivered with absolute confidence. You don't explain your reasoning or justify your decisions. You're the boss. That's all the justification anyone needs. But you can't micromanage. Even if you wanted to, which you don't, it would be impossible. You might have hundreds or thousands of orcs under your command, spread across a wide area, organized into dozens of different mobs. You can't personally oversee every one of them. This is where your nobs come in. They're your middle management, the enforcers who make sure your orders actually get carried out. Each nob commands his own mob of regular boys. The relationship between a nob and his boys is similar to your relationship with your nobs, just scaled down. He's bigger and meaner than they are, so they do what he says. If they don't, he hits them until they do. It's a beautifully simple system that requires almost no administrative overhead. No paperwork, no reports, no meetings. Just direct, violent enforcement of authority. Your relationship with your nobs is more complex. They're powerful enough to be threats, smart enough to be useful, and ambitious enough to be constantly watching for any sign of weakness. You need them, because without them, you can't organize your boys into effective fighting forces. But you also need to keep them in line, which means regular displays of dominance. You beat them in combat to remind them who's boss. You take the best loot before they get a chance to claim it. You publicly humiliate any nob who questions your decisions, making an example that keeps the others in line. But you also reward success. A nob who leads his mob to victory gets first pick of the loot after you've taken your share. A nob who fights particularly well gets praise, which in orc society means you tell everyone how good he is at killing things. A nob who shows unusual cunning, like setting an ambush that wipes out an enemy patrol, gets extra resources for his mob. These aren't codified rules. You make it up as you go along, but the principle is consistent. Success gets rewarded, failure gets punished, and questioning authority gets you killed. Different types of orcs require different management approaches. Regular boys are easy. They just want to fight. Point them at the enemy, give them weapons, and let them go. They'll sort themselves out. If they start fighting each other too much, you wade in personally and start cracking heads until they remember what they're supposed to be doing. It's not sophisticated, but it works. Mech boys need more freedom. They're obsessed with building things, and if you try to control them too strictly, they get frustrated and their work suffers. You give them general guidance, build me more trucks, or I want a bigger gun, and then you leave them alone to figure out the details. Sometimes they blow themselves up. Sometimes they create something incredible. Either way, it's entertaining, and successful creations make your mob more dangerous. Flash gits are knobs who've become obsessed with having the biggest, flashiest guns possible. They're show-offs and glory hounds, always trying to one-up each other with more ridiculous weapons. You manage them by playing to their egos, giving them particularly dangerous missions that let them show off their firepower. They're unreliable and undisciplined, but when you need something blown apart with overwhelming firepower, they're exactly what you want. Stormboys are young orcs with an uncharacteristic interest in discipline and organization. They wear jump packs and practice synchronized maneuvers. Other orcs think they're weird, and honestly, they are. But they're useful for flanking maneuvers and surprise attacks. You tolerate their strange behavior because they're effective, and because most of them grow out of it once they've been in enough real fights. Commandos are orcs who specialize in sneaky tactics, or at least what orcs consider sneaky. Their idea of a subtle infiltration involves painting themselves in camouflage, which they believe makes them invisible, and then loudly whispering to each other about how quiet they're being. Despite their questionable stealth skills, they're good at creating chaos behind enemy lines, and chaos is always useful in battle. The real challenge in managing your horde is keeping them focused. Orcs have short attention spans and a constant need for violence. If they go too long without a proper fight, they start getting restless. First, they fight each other more. Then they start grumbling about the lack of action. Then they start wondering if maybe a different warboss would find them better fights. This is how you lose your position, not through dramatic betrayal, but through your boys gradually deciding you're not delivering on the fundamental promise of orc leadership, which is finding good scraps. So you're constantly planning the next fight. You send out scouts, usually speed freaks on their warbikes, to find potential targets. You listen to rumors from passing freebooters about nearby conflicts. You watch for signs of enemy activity, increased patrol frequency, new fortifications, supply convoys moving through your territory. Any of these could be opportunities for a good fight, and a good fight keeps your boys happy. When you find a target, you plan your attack with whatever level of sophistication you can manage. Some warbosses are genuinely cunning, able to devise strategies that would impress professional military commanders. They set ambushes, coordinate multiple assault waves, and exploit enemy weaknesses with surprising effectiveness. Other warbosses just point their mob at the enemy and tell them to go kill everything that isn't green. Both approaches can work. Orcs are adaptable like that. Your planning typically involves gathering your nobs and loudly discussing the situation. You draw maps in the dirt or on scraps of metal, showing where the enemy is and where your mobs are going to attack. The nobs argue about who gets to lead the first wave, because being first into combat is prestigious. You settle these arguments by reminding everyone that you're the boss, and you'll decide who goes where. If someone argues too much, you hit them. Communication during battle is primitive but effective. You have horns, banners, and mostly just shouting really loud. When you want a mob to advance, you signal the nob in charge and roar orders. When you want everyone to charge, you personally lead the charge, because orcs follow their leader. If you're not at the front, fighting alongside your boys, they start wondering why they're risking their lives while you're sitting safely in the back. Leading from the front isn't just tradition, it's a survival requirement. Dealing with casualties is straightforward. Dead orcs don't need management. You loot their useful gear, feed their bodies to the squigs, or just leave them where they fell, and move on. Injured orcs either recover through their remarkable regenerative abilities, or they die. There's no medical system beyond the pain boys. who are more interested in experimenting than healing. If an orc is too injured to fight, he's not useful anymore. And orc society has no place for orcs who can't fight. Logistics exist, but barely. Orcs can eat almost anything organic. They brew their own fungus beer. They loot weapons and ammunition from defeated enemies. They repair their vehicles with whatever scrap they can find. This means you don't need complex supply lines or resource management. Your mob is largely self-sufficient, taking what it needs from whatever's nearby. This makes orc armies incredibly resilient. You can't starve them out or cut their supply lines because they don't really have supply lines to cut. The most important aspect of managing your horde is maintaining momentum. An orc mob in motion, fighting regular battles and winning consistently, is a beautiful thing. The victories feed the gestalt field, making everyone stronger. The loot keeps everyone happy. The regular combat gives everyone an outlet for their natural aggression. Everything works smoothly, or at least smoothly by orc standards. But if momentum stalls, if you go too long without victories, if your boys start feeling like they're not getting what they signed up for, that's when problems start. Nobs begin questioning your leadership more frequently. Challenges become more common. Other warbosses start circling, sensing weakness. Your position, which seemed unassailable during your winning streak, suddenly looks vulnerable. This is why you can never stop fighting. It's not just that you personally enjoy combat, though you do. It's that stopping means dying. Not immediately, not dramatically, but gradually, as your authority erodes and your rivals gain confidence. The only way to maintain your position is to keep winning, keep growing, keep pushing forward into new fights and new conquests. Stagnation is death for an orc warboss. Movement, violence, and constant conflict are life. Managing a green horde isn't about careful planning or precise execution. It's about understanding the fundamental nature of orcs and working with it rather than against it. You don't try to turn your boys into disciplined soldiers. You accept that they're violent, chaotic, and barely controllable, and you channel that chaos toward your enemies. You don't try to prevent all internal fighting. You accept that orcs fight each other constantly, and you just make sure the fighting doesn't get so bad that it undermines your ability to fight external enemies. In the end, managing a horde of orcs comes down to 3 simple principles. Be the loudest, be the strongest, and be the one who finds the best fights. Do those 3 things consistently, and your boys will follow you into the jaws of hell itself, roaring with joy the entire way. Fail at any of them, and you'll find yourself fighting for your life against your own nobs, trying desperately to reclaim authority that's already slipping away. It's not a sophisticated system. It's not elegant, but it is effective. And in the grim darkness of the far future, effectiveness is all that matters. Clan politics. Navigating orc society. Being a warboss means understanding that not all orcs are the same. Yes, they're all violent, aggressive, and obsessed with fighting. But within that general template, there are distinct cultural differences, preferences, and approaches to warfare. These differences are embodied in the clans, cultural groupings that transcend individual tribes and persist across the entire orc species. Every orc belongs to a clan, and understanding clan dynamics is crucial to effectively leading a diverse mob. The 6 major clans are found in nearly every orc population in the galaxy: the Goths, the Evil Suns, the Bad Moons, the Death Skulls, the Blood Axes, and the Snakebites. Each has its own distinct culture, preferred tactics, and reputation among other orcs. As a warboss, you probably have a strong clan affiliation yourself, but your tribe almost certainly includes orcs from multiple clans, and knowing how to work with each type is essential. The Goths are the largest and most numerous clan, and probably the clan you're most familiar with if you're a traditional warboss. Goths are all about close combat. They love the sound of gunfire and the satisfying crunch of their choppers sinking into enemy flesh. They wear basic black armor with white checkered patterns, and they believe that the best way to win any fight is to charge straight at the enemy and keep hitting things until everything stops moving. Goths produce more warbosses than any other clan, because they embody the pure, straightforward violence that orcs admire. If you're a goth yourself, you probably prefer direct assaults, massive close combat mobs, and tactics that can be summarized as hit them really hard. Managing goth boys is relatively simple. They want to be first into every fight. They want the best close combat weapons, and they want everyone to know how tough they are. You give them those things, or at least make them think you're giving them those things, and they'll follow you loyally. The main challenge with goths is that they can be so aggressive that they charge into situations that more cunning orcs would avoid. You need to keep them focused and make sure their enthusiasm for fighting doesn't lead to stupid decisions. The evil sons are speed freaks obsessed with going fast. They believe absolutely in the power of red paint to make vehicles go faster, and they dedicate enormous resources to acquiring and maintaining bikes, trucks, buggies, and anything else with wheels or engines. Evil sons wear bright red with flame patterns, and they're never happier than when they're racing toward the enemy at maximum speed while firing every weapon they can reach. Evil sons require more mech boys than other clans because they need constant maintenance on their vehicles. As a warboss managing evil sons, you need to make sure they have access to good mechanics and plenty of scrap to keep their machines running. You also need to accept that they're going to be less interested in infantry tactics and more interested in mounted warfare. The advantage is that evil sons are incredibly mobile and can hit the enemy where they least expect it. The disadvantage is that they sometimes get so excited about going fast that they forget to actually fight the enemy, just racing past them in pursuit of ever greater speeds. The Bad Moons are the wealthiest orcs because their teeth grow faster than anyone else's. In orc society, teeth are currency, so Bad Moons are always rich. They use their wealth to buy the biggest, flashiest, loudest guns available. They wear bright yellow with gold trim, and they firmly believe that more Dakar is always the answer to any problem. Bad Moons are show-offs who love displaying their wealth and firepower. Managing Bad Moons means understanding that they care more about having impressive gear than about using it effectively. They'll spend enormous amounts of teeth on weapons that are more flash than substance, but when they actually get into combat, they can lay down an impressive amount of firepower. Bad Moons are good for ranged combat and suppressing fire. The challenge is that they're greedy and constantly trying to acquire more wealth and better guns, which can lead to conflicts with other orcs who want the same resources. The Death Skulls are looters and scavengers who believe that blue is the luckiest color. They paint everything blue, and they have an almost supernatural ability to find useful items on battlefields. Death Skulls are constantly acquiring things that technically belong to other orcs, which other orcs call stealing but Death Skulls call salvage. They're excellent at scavenging enemy equipment and converting it to orc use. Death Skulls are valuable because they keep your mob well supplied with looted gear, but you need to watch them carefully because they'll loot from your own boys if you're not paying attention. As a warboss, you need to set clear boundaries about what can and can't be looted. Dead enemies, fair game. Living boys' equipment, that's going to cause fights. The Death Skulls will test these boundaries constantly, so you need to enforce them with violence when necessary. The Blood Axes are the most controversial clan because they're willing to use tactics that other orcs consider sneaky and un-orky. They've fought the Imperium so much that they've started adopting human tactics like camouflage, planning, and actual battlefield coordination. They don't have a specific color, preferring various camouflage patterns. Other orcs call them sneaky gits and don't fully trust them, but their tactics can be surprisingly effective. Managing Blood Axes is tricky because you need to balance their usefulness with the fact that other orcs think they're weird. Blood Axes are good for reconnaissance, flanking maneuvers, and coordinated assaults. But if you rely on them too much, your other orcs might start grumbling that you're not fighting proper. The key is to use Blood Axes for specific tasks where their skills shine, while keeping your main force full of more traditional orcs who fight in the straightforward style that orcs prefer. The Snakebites are primitives who reject advanced technology in favor of traditional orc ways. They ride squigs into battle, use basic weapons, and generally act like orcs did before they had access to advanced technology. They're superstitious and traditional, and they look down on orcs who rely too heavily on fancy gear. Snakebites are tough, mean, and excellent in close combat, but they lack the firepower of more technologically advanced clans. Snakebites are useful because they're self-sufficient and don't require much support. They provide their own mounts, their own food, and their own entertainment. But they can be difficult to manage because they resist innovation and don't always cooperate well with more tech-savvy orcs. As a warboss, you mostly leave snakebites alone to do their own thing, using them as shock troops or for missions where raw toughness matters more than firepower or mobility. Beyond these 6 major clans, there are also freebooters, orcs who've left their tribes for whatever reason and now operate as mercenaries or pirates. Freebooters aren't really a clan in the traditional sense, more like a collection of orcs who don't fit anywhere else. They're led by captains who dress flamboyantly and operate with an even more aggressive profit motive than usual for orcs. Freebooters can be hired for specific missions, but they're unreliable and will abandon you if they find a better deal. As a warboss, your own clan affiliation matters. If you're a goth, other goths will naturally be more loyal to you, but orcs from other clans might see you as too straightforward, lacking in cunning. If you're a blood axe, you might have a reputation for being sneaky, which can be an advantage in some situations, but makes traditional orcs distrust you. Your clan shapes how other orcs perceive you and influences which tactics work best for your leadership style. Clan rivalries are constant but rarely serious. Goths think evil sons are too obsessed with speed. Evil sons think bad moons are all show and no substance. Bad moons think death skulls are thieves. Death skulls think blood axes are traitors to orc culture. Blood axes think snakebites are backwards. Snakebites think everyone else has lost touch with true orc traditions. These rivalries lead to constant bickering, occasional fights, and a lot of insults, but they rarely threaten the unity of a tribe. The key to managing clan politics is understanding that clan identity is strong but not absolute. An orc is first and foremost an orc. Clan affiliation comes second, when there's a good fight to be had. Clan differences disappear as everyone focuses on the enemy. It's only during downtime, when orcs are bored and looking for something to argue about, that clan rivalries become significant. You exploit these rivalries when useful. If you need orcs to fight harder, you can challenge clan pride. I bet the Goths are too scared to charge that bunker. Watch the Goths. Immediately charge the bunker, just to prove you wrong. I heard the evil sons' bikes are getting slow. Watch the evil sons immediately start racing each other to prove they're still the fastest. Orcs are competitive by nature, and clan identity gives them something to compete about. You also use clan specialties strategically. When you need fast strikes, you deploy evil sons. When you need overwhelming firepower, you deploy bad moons. When you need something important looted, you deploy death skulls. When you need sneaky tactics, you deploy blood axes. When you need tough shock troops, you deploy goths or snakebites. This isn't sophisticated military strategy, but it's effective because you're putting each type of orc in situations where their natural inclinations become advantages. The real art is keeping clan rivalries from turning into actual civil war. Occasional fights between boys from different clans are normal and acceptable. It lets them blow off steam and establishes hierarchies within your tribe. But if clan fighting gets so bad that it undermines your military effectiveness, you need to step in and crack heads. You don't take sides in these disputes. You're above clan politics because you're the boss. You enforce a simple rule: fight each other a little if you must, but anyone who prioritizes clan rivalry over fighting the actual enemy answers to you. Navigating clan politics isn't really about diplomacy or negotiation. Orcs don't do those things. It's about understanding the different types of orcs under your command, knowing what motivates each clan, and using that knowledge to organize your forces effectively. It's about channeling clan rivalries into productive competition rather than destructive infighting. And it's about maintaining your position above all clan identities as the supreme authority that all orcs, regardless of clan, must obey. In the end, clan politics are just another aspect of the complex, violent, chaotic system that is Orc society. Like everything else in Orc culture, it works through a combination of violence, competition, and instinctive understanding of social dynamics. As a Warboss, you don't try to eliminate clan differences or create artificial unity. You accept the diversity of your mob, work with it rather than against it, and use the unique strengths of each clan to make your tribe more dangerous than it would be if everyone was identical. Because, in the final analysis, the enemy doesn't care whether they're being killed by Goths, evil suns, or bad moons. They just care that they're being killed by Orcs, and that's all that really matters. Arsenal of destruction, weapons, and war gear. Your power claw is your most treasured possession. Not because of sentimentality, Orcs don't really do sentimentality, but because it's the most brutally effective weapon you own. It's a massive mechanical claw powered by hydraulic systems and crackling with energy fields that can tear through tank armor like paper. When you clench that claw around an enemy's body, the hydraulics amplify your already considerable strength, to the point where you can literally crush Space Marines in their armor, fold vehicles in half, and rip through reinforced doors like they're made of cardboard. The power claw represents everything about being a Warboss. It's big, it's loud, it's intimidating, and it kills things with extreme prejudice. When you raise it above your head and roar a challenge, every Orc in sight feels their blood pumping harder. When you use it to crush an enemy champion, your boys roar their approval so loudly that it drowns out the sounds of battle. The power claw isn't just a weapon, it's a symbol of your authority. Physical proof that you're the biggest and the baddest. Maintaining your power claw is a constant concern. The hydraulic systems need regular maintenance, which means regular visits to your big mech. The energy field generators sometimes burn out and need replacement. The mechanical components wear down from use, requiring new parts. Orc technology is famously unreliable, and your power claw is no exception. But when it's working properly, nothing else comes close to its combination of intimidation and raw destructive power. Your shooter is less impressive but more practical. It's some variant of Orc projectile weapon, probably a combi weapon that combines a shooter with a rocket launcher or scorcher. The shooter part fires solid slugs at high velocity with reasonable accuracy, at least by Orc standards. The rocket part fires explosive rockets that can take out vehicles or fortifications. The scorcher part sprays burning promethium that incinerates everything in front of you. Orc firearms shouldn't work as well as they do. They're assembled from mismatched parts, held together with whatever the mech had available, and loaded with ammunition that's often just random bits of metal. But the Gestalt field makes them work anyway, smoothing over the engineering deficiencies through sheer collective belief. Your shooter probably misfires occasionally, might explode if you're particularly unlucky, and definitely isn't winning any awards for reliability. But it kills enemies consistently enough that you keep using it. You probably don't use the shooter as much as you use the claw. Orcs prefer close combat, and Warbosses especially prefer being up close, where they can personally crush enemies. But the shooter is useful for softening up targets before you get close enough to use the claw, for suppressing enemy fire, and for those rare occasions when you need to kill something at range. The rocket, in particular, is useful for taking out vehicles or heavy infantry that might otherwise be problematic. Your chopper is simple but effective. It's basically a massive blade, probably longer than most humans are tall, sharpened to a rough edge, and heavy enough that momentum does most of the killing. There's nothing fancy about it. No energy fields, no special materials, just a big piece of metal that you swing at enemies with bone-crushing force. But sometimes, simple is best. The chopper never runs out of ammunition, never needs maintenance beyond occasional sharpening, and never fails at the critical moment. You use the chopper when you want to kill things, but don't want to waste the energy from your power claw. It's efficient, reliable, and satisfying in a primal way that high-tech weapons can't match. There's something visceral about the impact of metal on flesh, the resistance as the blade cuts through armor and bone, the spray of blood that decorates your armor after each swing. The chopper connects you directly to the violence in a way that ranged weapons don't. Your armor is a patchwork masterpiece of looted plates, custom fabrication, and accumulated additions. The base is probably EV armor, thick plates of metal that cover your vital areas while still allowing freedom of movement. But you've added to it over the years, welding on additional plates from defeated enemies, attaching trophies that also serve as extra protection, and having your mechs install various augmentations. Some warbosses eventually upgrade to mega armor, massive suits of powered armor that turn them into walking tanks. Mega armor provides incredible protection, effectively making you immune to small arms fire and resistant to most heavy weapons. It also includes power augmentation systems that make you even stronger than you already are. The downside is that mega armor is slow, cumbersome, and restricts your mobility. You're giving up speed and agility for protection and strength. Whether that trade-off is worth it depends on your fighting style and personal preferences. Your armor is decorated with your trophies, and these decorations serve multiple purposes. They show off your victories to other orcs, establishing and maintaining your reputation. They intimidate enemies who recognize what they're looking at, and they have practical value, as some trophies provide actual protection. That Space Marine helmet you've attached to your shoulder plate, it's ceramite, one of the toughest materials in the galaxy. That piece of Imperial Guard tank armor welded to your chest, it's ablative plating that can stop heavy rounds. Your armor is both fashion statement and functional protection. Your boss pole is probably your most visible status symbol. It's a tall pole that attaches to your back, extending several feet above your head, decorated with banners, pennants, skulls, and various other items that show off your achievements. The banners are covered in crude orc glyphs and pictograms that tell the story of your victories. The skulls belong to particularly impressive enemies you've killed. The pennants might be looted from enemy forces or gifted to you by subordinate orcs who want to curry favor. The boss pole serves several practical purposes. It makes you visible across the battlefield, which is important because your boys need to see where you are so they know where to rally. It intimidates enemies by displaying the fate of your previous opponents. And it channels the Gestalt field, focusing the psychic energy of your mob and directing it toward you. When your boys see that boss pole waving above the chaos of battle, they fight harder, knowing their leader is nearby. You probably have various other weapons and equipment scattered around your person. Stick bombs, the orc equivalent of grenades, useful for clearing fortifications or bunkers. A backup shooter or two. Because redundancy is good when your primary weapons are as unreliable as orc technology. Maybe a special weapon you've taken from a defeated enemy, an Eldar power weapon, or a Space Marine bolt pistol, trophies that you keep as much for their symbolic value as their practical use. Your war gear also probably includes various bionic enhancements. Orc painboys love installing cybernetic implants, partly because they're useful, but mostly because painboys enjoy surgery. Maybe you've got a bionic eye that can see in different spectrums. Maybe you've got a reinforced spine that lets you carry heavier weapons. Maybe you've got a subdermal armor plating that makes you even tougher. These additions aren't strictly necessary, but they're available. And in orc culture, having more augmentations is a status symbol that shows you've survived enough injuries to need them. Some warbosses develop specific weapon preferences based on their personality and fighting style. Ghazghkull Thraka was famous for focusing more on commanding his troops than personal combat, only engaging enemies himself at critical moments. He equipped himself with weapons that supported this role: a combi weapon for versatility, a power claw for when close combat was necessary, and extensive augmentations that made him tougher and harder to kill. Other warbosses go in completely different directions. Some favor massive choppers that they can use to cleave through multiple enemies with each swing. Some collect shooters until they're carrying half a dozen firearms, creating a walking arsenal that can lay down withering fire. Some focus on defense, covering themselves in so much armor that they're essentially mobile fortresses. There's no right way to equip a warboss. You choose weapons and war gear based on what works for you. The process of acquiring new war gear is constant. Every battle produces new loot, new opportunities to upgrade your equipment. You claim the best pieces for yourself, by right of being the boss. If you see an enemy carrying an impressive weapon, you make a point of killing that enemy personally, so you can take the weapon. If your mechs create something particularly interesting, you claim it before any of your nobs can get their hands on it. You also commission custom work from your big mechs. Maybe you want a power claw with extra crushing force. Maybe you want a combi weapon that combines 3 different weapon types instead of just 2. Maybe you want armor plating that's even thicker than standard EV armor. The big mechs can build these things, assuming they have the resources and don't blow themselves up in the process. You pay them in loot, in protection, or by letting them test their experimental weapons on your enemies. Your weapons and wargear are more than just tools. They're expressions of your personality, symbols of your achievements, and physical manifestations of your power. Every piece tells a story. That dent in your chestplate came from a tank round that should have killed you. That skull on your boss pole belonged to a Space Marine captain who challenged you to single combat. That power claw was built from parts salvaged from an Imperial knight you helped destroy. When you stand fully equipped, weapons ready, armor gleaming with crude maintenance, and decorated with trophies, you're not just a warboss. You're a walking testament to orc culture, a physical embodiment of everything orcs value: strength, violence, success, and the absolute domination of anyone weaker than yourself. Your arsenal isn't carefully curated or standardized. It's chaotic, personalized, and perfectly suited to the brutal, direct approach that characterizes orc warfare. And when you wade into battle wielding all this destructive power, your enemies understand immediately why warbosses are so terrifying. You're not just big and strong. You're big and strong and heavily armed with weapons that can tear apart anything the enemy brings to the fight. You're a one-orc army, a walking catastrophe that kills everything in reach and keeps coming no matter how much damage you take. That's what your arsenal represents. That's what being properly equipped as a warboss means. It's not about carefully balanced loadouts or optimal configurations. It's about having the biggest, loudest, most destructive weapons available and using them to crush anything that stands in your way. The call to war. Launching a campaign. The decision to launch a major campaign doesn't come from careful strategic planning or detailed intelligence analysis. It comes from your gut, from the instinctive understanding that it's time to gather your forces and go crump something big. Maybe you've had a string of successful raids and your mob has grown large enough that staying in one place is causing problems. Maybe word has reached you of a particularly tempting target, a wealthy human world, or a Xenos stronghold. Maybe you're just bored, and boredom for an orc warboss is dangerous because it means you start looking for new challenges. The moment the decision crystallizes in your mind, you immediately start roaring orders. Your knobs scramble to attention, knowing from experience that when the boss gets that particular look in his eye, something big is about to happen. You summon all your key lieutenants, the knobs who command the largest mobs, the big mech who oversees your technology, maybe a weird boy if you have one, you trust not to explode at an inopportune moment. The planning session, if you can call it that, is loud and chaotic. You draw crude maps in the dirt or on metal scraps, showing the approximate location of your target and the general direction your mob needs to go. Knobs argue about who gets to lead the first assault, who gets the best loot, who's going to bring the most boys. You settle these arguments with a combination of shouting and violence, establishing the pecking order for the upcoming campaign. Your target is chosen based on orc logic, which means it's probably the thing that seems like it will produce the best fight. Humans are always good targets because they're widespread. They fight back enough to be interesting, and they have excellent loot. The Imperium's armies are well equipped with weapons and vehicles that can be repurposed for orc use. Their fortifications are strong enough to make assaulting them challenging. Their soldiers are numerous enough that you won't run out of enemies too quickly. But maybe you're going after something else. Maybe there are Eldar in the area, and while Eldar don't have as much good loot, they're tricky opponents who provide interesting challenges. Maybe Chaos forces have invaded nearby systems, and while Chaos Marines are corrupted, they're still worthy opponents who put up good fights. Maybe there's a Tyrannid hive fleet in the region, and while bugs don't have any loot worth taking, fighting them is pure, unadulterated violence, without any of the complications that come with looting. Once you've decided on a target, you need to gather forces. This is where the Gestalt field becomes crucial. When a warboss announces a major campaign, The psychic pressure alerts orcs across a wide area. Orcs who were thinking about finding a new tribe suddenly feel drawn to yours. Wandering mobs of orcs hear about your plans and start moving in your direction. Freebooters show up looking for employment opportunities. The word spreads through channels that barely exist, traveling faster than any communication system could explain, powered by the Gestalt field itself. Your mob grows rapidly. What started as a few hundred, orcs swells to thousands. Tribes that were previously independent decide to join your campaign, bringing their own warbosses who grudgingly accept subordinate positions because they recognize you're leading something big. Mech boys converge on your location, setting up workshops to build the vehicles and weapons you'll need. Pain boys establish crude field hospitals where they can experiment on the injured. The whole operation expands organically, without centralized planning or coordination, held together by nothing except the collective belief that this is going to be a proper good fight. During this preparation phase, you deal with constant challenges to your authority. Other warbosses who've joined your campaign test your resolve, probing for weakness, seeing if maybe they should be leading this crusade instead of you. You beat them all. Not just beat them, but beat them publicly and decisively, making sure every orc in camp sees that you're still the biggest and the meanest. These fights are exhausting, but they're necessary. A campaign of this size needs absolute clarity about who's in charge. Your mech boys work overtime building the equipment you'll need. Trucks and battle wagons roll out of workshops, fresh paint still wet, engines roaring despite having been assembled from scrap just hours before. Bigger projects emerge. Looted tanks repurposed for orc use. Crude artillery pieces welded together from salvaged barrels. Even the occasional gargant, if you've accumulated enough resources and your big mechs are feeling ambitious. The whole camp becomes a massive, chaotic workshop where thousands of orcs build the instruments of war they'll need. Meanwhile, you're dealing with logistics, or at least the orc version of logistics. You're making sure there's enough ammunition for the journey. You're organizing the mob into rough formations, grouping orcs by clan and specialty. You're designating which nobs will be responsible for which sections of the army. You're checking that your vehicles have enough fuel to reach the target, and if they don't, you're planning raids to acquire more fuel. This preparation period is when the energy really starts building. Thousands of orcs, all gathered in one place, all focused on the upcoming fight, create a psychic pressure that's almost tangible. The Gestalt field grows stronger by the day, feeding on the collective excitement and anticipation. Weird boys start having more frequent visions, sometimes prophetic, sometimes just random psychic noise. The mech boys find their work going more smoothly than usual, their machines functioning better than they have any right to. Everything seems to click into place, powered by the collective belief that this campaign is going to be legendary. Eventually, you reach a critical mass. Your mob has grown as large as it's going to get, without actually fighting something. Your equipment is as ready as orc equipment ever is. Your boys are practically vibrating with anticipation, needing to fight something before they start fighting each other. It's time to move. The launch of a major orc campaign is simultaneously chaotic and awe-inspiring. Thousands of orcs load into vehicles, mount their bikes, or simply start marching on foot. The convoy stretches for miles, a river of green flesh and rusty metal flowing toward the enemy. Vehicles belch smoke and noise, their engines roaring at volumes that can be heard from miles away. Orcs roar their war cries, bellowing challenges at enemies who are still too far away to hear. The Gestalt field pulses with power, a green psychic wave that precedes the physical army. You lead from the front, as warbosses must. Your position at the head of the army isn't just symbolic. It's practical. Your boys need to see you, need to know that their leader is facing the same dangers they are, need the inspiration that comes from following a warboss who's brave enough or crazy enough to charge directly at the enemy. You ride in a battle wagon or on a bike, weapons ready, scanning the horizon for your first targets. The journey to your target might take days or weeks, depending on distance and obstacles. During this time, you need to keep your mob focused and moving in roughly the right direction. This is harder than it sounds, because orcs have short attention spans and a tendency to get distracted by anything that looks like it might be worth fighting. You impose discipline the only way orcs understand: through violence. When boys start wandering off to raid local settlements, you send nobs to round them up. When arguments between different mobs threaten to turn into actual combat, you intervene personally and crack heads until everyone remembers what they're supposed to be fighting. You also encounter obstacles along the way. Imperial forces might try to stop your advance, establishing roadblocks or ambushes designed to slow you down. These are opportunities for minor battles that keep your boys entertained and give them experience before the main event. You smash through these obstacles with overwhelming force, treating them almost as training exercises for the larger battle to come. As you get closer to your target, the enemy becomes aware of your approach. They can hardly miss you, given that your army is making enough noise to wake the dead and leaving a trail of destruction that's visible from orbit. They start preparing their defenses, calling in reinforcements, positioning their armies to meet your assault. This is when the anticipation reaches its peak. Your boys know the big fight is coming soon, and they can barely contain their excitement. You send forward scouts, usually speed freaks on bikes, to gather intelligence about enemy positions. The reports they bring back are crude but useful. They got big walls, lots of shooters, saw some of dem big tanks. You process this information and formulate your battle plan, which usually amounts to deciding which direction to attack from and which nobs will lead which assaults. The night before the battle is electric with tension. Your camp is a sea of green flesh and burning fires, orcs preparing weapons, painting vehicles, and generally getting ready for the fight of their lives. Some orcs paint themselves with crude war paint, others check and recheck their equipment. Many just sit around getting drunk on fungus beer and bragging about what they're going to do tomorrow. You walk among them, making your presence known, reminding them through your mere existence why they're here and who they're fighting for. You don't sleep much that night, partly because you're too excited, partly because you're going over the battle plan in your head, and partly because you never know when some ambitious knob might decide this is the perfect time to challenge your leadership. You sit in your quarters, surrounded by your trophies, weapons within easy reach, listening to the sounds of thousands of orcs preparing for war. When morning comes, if you can call it that, given that you're probably launching your assault at whatever time seems most convenient, rather than waiting for actual morning, you give the order to advance. This is the moment everything has been building toward. This is when the planning, such as it was, gives way to action. This is when your carefully assembled army transforms into a green tide of violence and destruction that crashes against the enemy with unstoppable force. You lead the charge personally, weapons ready, roaring your war cry, feeling the gestalt field surge around you as thousands of orcs follow their warboss into battle. This is what you were made for. This is what every challenge, every fight, every decision has led to. This is the moment when you're not just a warboss, but a force of nature, a living embodiment of orc culture and orc violence, leading your people to do what they do best: fight, kill, and conquer. The call to war isn't just a military decision. It's the culmination of everything that makes you a warboss. It's the proof that you can not only lead orcs, but inspire them to follow you into the jaws of death itself. It's the ultimate expression of your authority, your strength, and your ability to deliver on the fundamental promise of orc leadership, taking your boys to the best fights in the galaxy. On the battlefield, leading the charge. The moment your mob crashes into the enemy lines is pure, distilled chaos. Thousands of orcs all trying to kill everything in front of them, all roaring and shooting and chopping, all completely convinced they're the best fighter in the galaxy. You're right there at the front, because that's where warbosses belong, your power claw already dripping with blood from the first enemies you've crushed, your bellowing war cry audible even over the thunderous cacophony of battle. Leading from the front isn't a choice. It's a requirement. If you hung back, safe and distant from the fighting, your boys would start wondering why they're risking their lives while you're protected. Orcs don't respect leaders who won't fight alongside them. They respect leaders who are the first into danger, who fight harder than anyone else, who kill more enemies than any of their subordinates. Your position at the front of the charge isn't just symbolic, it's essential to maintaining your authority. The first wave of contact is the most intense. Your mob slams into the enemy defensive line like a green tidal wave made of muscle, metal, and murderous intent. The enemy responds with everything they have. Lasgun fire from Imperial Guardsmen, bolter rounds from Space Marines, eldritch energy from Eldar weapons. Whatever they've got, they're throwing it at you with desperate intensity. Most of it bounces off your armor or misses entirely because you're too tough and too fast to be easily killed. Some of it connects, and you feel the impacts even through your thick armor, but you ignore the pain and keep advancing. You target enemy champions first. This is both strategic and personal. Strategically, killing enemy leaders disrupts their command structure and makes the rest of their forces easier to defeat. Personally, you want the best fights, and enemy champions are always the best fights. You spot a Space Marine sergeant rallying his troops and immediately charge toward him, bellowing a challenge that he probably can't understand, but definitely can't ignore. The fight is brief but brutal. The Space Marine is skilled, well-armed, and backed by his brothers. He fires his bolter at point-blank range, the explosive rounds detonating against your armor with enough force to stagger you. But you're a Warboss, and you don't go down that easily. You swat the bolter aside with your chopper and close the remaining distance in a rush. Your power claw closes around his torso, and you squeeze. His power armor crumples like paper, and he dies with a scream that's cut short by the sound of breaking bones. Your boys see this and roar their approval. This is what they're here for, watching their Warboss crush the enemy's champions, proving that orcs are superior to everyone else. The killing of the sergeant creates a gap in the enemy line, and your mob pours through it, exploiting the breach you've created. You don't pause to celebrate or rest. You're already looking for the next target, the next enemy worth killing. Battle is where you're most alive. The adrenaline, or whatever the orc equivalent is, pumps through your system. Your senses sharpen, time seems to slow down, and you process information with a clarity that's impossible outside of combat. You track multiple threats simultaneously, your instincts warning you about dangers before your conscious mind registers them. A tank round incoming from your left, you dodge. Incoming melee attack from your right, you counter with your chopper. It's not thinking in the human sense, it's pure reactive combat instinct, honed by thousands of fights. Your combat style is aggressive and direct. You don't do fancy footwork or elaborate tactics. You charge straight at the enemy, weapons swinging, and kill everything in reach. When something tries to block your path, you go through it rather than around it. Walls get smashed down, vehicles get torn apart, infantry get crushed or chopped or shot at point-blank range. You're not trying to be elegant or efficient. You're trying to kill as many enemies as possible, as quickly as possible, and elegance doesn't factor into it. But you're not mindless. Even in the heat of battle, you're aware of the larger tactical situation. You notice when a flank is collapsing and needs reinforcement. You see, when an enemy position is vulnerable and needs to be exploited, you track which of your knobs are doing well and which are struggling. This information flows through your consciousness automatically, processed by instincts that combine your personal experience with the Gestalt field's collective knowledge. You direct your forces through a combination of shouting, signaling, and just physically grabbing knobs and pointing them in the direction you want them to go. You lot, go crump dat tank, you bellow, pointing at an enemy vehicle that's causing problems. The designated knobs roar acknowledgement and lead their boys toward the target. Dem, gits, need more crumpin'. You shout at another group, redirecting them toward a section of the enemy line that's holding too strong. It's not sophisticated command and control, but it works. The battle evolves and shifts constantly. Enemy forces that were holding firm suddenly break and run. Sections of the line that seemed secure collapse under sustained orc assault. New threats emerge from unexpected directions. You adapt on the fly, responding to each development with immediate violence. There's no time for careful consideration or weighing of options. You see a problem. You solve it by hitting it really hard. and then you move on to the next problem. Your personal bodyguard, typically a squad of the biggest and meanest knobs in your tribe, stays close to you throughout the battle. They're not there because you need protection, though they will defend you if necessary. They're there because being near the Warboss is prestigious, because they want to share in the best fights, and because someone needs to make sure other orcs don't accidentally crush you in the melee. These knobs are the elite of your elite, and they fight with terrifying effectiveness. As the battle progresses, you start to feel the fatigue. Even orcs, with their remarkable endurance and rapid healing, have limits. Your arms ache from swinging weapons. Your legs burn from constant movement. Your armor, already damaged from countless hits, is actively impeding your movement in places where it's been bent or crushed. But you can't show weakness, can't slow down, can't give any impression that you're anything less than invincible. So you ignore the pain and keep fighting. The Gestalt field pulses around you like a living thing, growing stronger as your mob achieves success, and weaker when they struggle. You can feel it responding to the flow of battle, feeding energy to winners, and withdrawing from losers in the brutal, meritocratic way that defines orc society. When your boys are winning, the Gestalt field makes them stronger, faster, tougher. When they're losing, it abandons them to their fate. You, as the focal point of that energy, feel these fluctuations more intensely than anyone else. You also notice the enemy's morale breaking. Humans, in particular, are vulnerable to morale collapse when faced with overwhelming orc assault. They start shooting less accurately. Their formations fall apart. Some start retreating without orders, then more join them, and suddenly the entire enemy force is in full rout. This is when the battle transforms from a fight into a slaughter. Your boys pursue the fleeing enemy with savage joy, cutting down anyone they catch. But not all enemies break easily. Space Marines fight to the last, their conditioning and pride preventing retreat even in the face of certain death. Chaos Marines are even worse, sustained by dark powers and fanatic devotion. Against these enemies, the battle becomes a grinding meat grinder, where victory is measured in inches rather than miles. These are the fights you remember, the ones that test your limits and prove your worth. During these prolonged engagements, you have to manage your mob's energy and enthusiasm. Orcs love fighting, but even they can become exhausted or disheartened if battles drag on too long without clear success. You keep them motivated through personal example, constantly being visible, constantly killing enemies, constantly proving that victory is possible if they just keep pushing. You single out knobs who are doing particularly well and praise them publicly. You execute or demote knobs who are failing their responsibilities. You make sure everyone understands that success is rewarded and failure is punished. Eventually, inevitably, the enemy breaks. Maybe they retreat in good order, falling back to secondary defensive positions. Maybe they rout completely, abandoning their equipment and fleeing for their lives. Maybe they're simply wiped out to the last soldier, dying where they stand because retreat was never an option. However it ends, you've won, and your boys know it. The aftermath of battle is almost as chaotic as the battle itself. Your mob immediately begins looting, stripping the battlefield of anything useful. Weapons, armor, vehicle parts, ammunition, food, anything that isn't nailed down, and some things that are. You claim the best loot for yourself, the enemy champion's weapon, a particularly impressive trophy, whatever catches your eye. The knobs get second choice, and the regular boys fight over what remains. You survey the battlefield with satisfaction. Dead enemies scattered everywhere, destroyed vehicles smoking in the wreckage, captured territory that's now yours. This is success, orc style, not carefully achieved through brilliant strategy, but brutally accomplished through overwhelming force and relentless violence. You've proven once again that you're the boss, that you can lead your boys to victory, that following you means getting into the best fights and coming out on top. You also take stock of your losses. Dead orcs lie among the dead enemies, proof that victory came at a price. But orcs don't mourn their dead the way other species do. Dead boys are just orcs who weren't strong enough or lucky enough to survive. You note which nobs died and mentally promote their replacements. You order the pain boys to check on wounded orcs who might be salvageable. You have the Gretchen start cleaning up the worst of the mess. As night falls over the battlefield, you gather your surviving nobs and celebrate. Celebration for orcs means drinking fungus beer, eating looted food, and bragging about how many enemies each orc killed. You participate enthusiastically, sharing stories of your own kills, laughing at the nobs who got particularly good ones, and generally enjoying the afterglow of victory. This is fellowship, orc style, bonded not through affection, but through shared violence and mutual respect earned in battle. But even as you celebrate, part of your mind is already thinking about the next fight. Because this battle, as satisfying as it was, is just one battle. There are always more enemies, more targets, more opportunities for good scraps. Tomorrow, or the day after, you'll be planning the next assault, gathering your forces, preparing for the next campaign. Because that's what warbosses do. They fight, they win, and they immediately start looking for the next fight. This is what being a warboss means on the battlefield. Constant violence, constant danger, constant proof that you deserve your position through brutal, overwhelming success. You're not a general directing battles from safety. You're a warrior king who fights alongside his troops, proving your right to lead through personal combat prowess. Every battle is both a military campaign and a personal test, a chance to demonstrate that you're still the biggest, the meanest, and the best. And as long as you keep winning these tests, as long as you keep leading your boys to victory, you remain the boss. The moment you fail, the moment you show weakness or lose too many fights, that's when the challenges start coming in earnest. That's when your position becomes vulnerable. That's when you have to fight not just for victory but for survival. But tonight, after this victory, you're secure. Your boys are loyal. Your reputation is enhanced, and your position is unassailable, at least until tomorrow, when the cycle begins again. Victory and spoils. What comes after? The looting begins even before the last enemy stops twitching. Gretchens swarm over the battlefield like scavengers, collecting spent shell casings, salvageable weapons, and anything else that might be useful. The bigger orcs follow behind, taking the better prizes, intact weapons, functioning equipment, valuable trophies. You watch this organized chaos with satisfaction. This is the reward for victory, the tangible proof that all the fighting and killing was worth it. You claim your picks first, by right of being the boss. That Space Marine captain you killed personally? His power sword is yours now. A fine trophy even if you probably won't use it as a weapon since you prefer your power claw. The banner of the Imperial Guard regiment you destroyed. That goes on your boss pole, another symbol of your victories. The intact bolter you found on one of the dead Space Marines? You'll give that to one of your nobs as a reward for particularly good service. The hierarchy of looting is clear and enforced brutally. You take what you want. Your nobs take what they want from what remains. Regular boys fight over the scraps. Gretchen get whatever nobody else wanted. This system works because everyone understands their place in it. Orcs who try to loot above their station get beaten or killed as examples to others. The system self-enforces through violence, like everything else in orc society. Your mech boys are particularly excited about the loot. Enemy vehicles that are still somewhat intact get towed back to your workshops for conversion. Imperial Guard tanks become orc battle wagons. Space Marine bikes get stripped for parts and rebuilt as orc war bikes. Even destroyed vehicles have value as scrap metal that can be repurposed into new weapons or armor. The mech boys see the battlefield not as a cemetery but as a massive hardware store where everything is free. You also collect trophies for more personal reasons. That enemy champion who gave you a good fight. You take his skull and add it to your collection. That particularly difficult fortification you had to smash through. You take a piece of the wall as a memento. That weapon that killed 3 of your nobs before you finally destroyed it. You take whatever remains as proof that you overcame it. These trophies tell the story of your campaigns more effectively than any written record. The aftermath of a major victory also brings administrative concerns, if you can call it that. Wounded orcs need attention from the pain boys, though attention In this case, means the Pain Boys either patch them up enough to fight again or harvest their useful bits for spare parts. Dead orcs are disposed of, usually by being fed to squigs or just left where they fell. The battlefield needs to be organized into something approaching a functional encampment. You also deal with the influx of new orcs. Victory attracts followers. Word of your success spreads through the Gestalt field faster than any messenger could travel, and soon you're seeing new faces around your camp. Young orcs looking for a successful mob to join. Nobez from defeated tribes seeking new leadership. Freebooters attracted by the promise of good loot and good fights. Your mob swells with these additions, growing larger and more powerful. But growth brings its own problems. More orcs mean more internal conflicts, more challenges to manage, more mouths to feed. You need to integrate these new additions into your existing structure, which means assigning them to nobs, making sure they understand the pecking order, and beating anyone who thinks they can challenge the established hierarchy. It's exhausting work, but it's necessary if you want to maintain control of your expanding force. You also grow physically from your victory. This is the most visible effect of the Gestalt field. The surge of psychic energy from your triumph literally makes you bigger. Your muscles expand, your bones thicken, your entire frame becomes more massive. This growth happens gradually over days or weeks, but it's noticeable to anyone who's paying attention. Nobs who were almost as big as you find themselves looking up at you again. Your armor needs adjustments to fit your expanding frame. Your weapons feel lighter because you're stronger. This growth is both a blessing and a burden. Being bigger makes you more dangerous in combat, more intimidating to your enemies, and more impressive to your followers. But it also makes you a more obvious target. Enemy forces prioritize killing you because they recognize that taking out the Warboss is the fastest way to break an orc mob. Other orcs start seeing you as a more attractive target for challenges because beating someone your size would be incredibly prestigious. The victory celebration continues for days or even weeks, depending on how significant the win was and how much loot you acquired. Orcs feast on whatever food they looted or hunted. They drink excessive amounts of fungus beer. They fight each other in relatively friendly brawls that only occasionally result in deaths. They tell and retell stories of the battle, each version more exaggerated than the last. This celebration serves important social functions, bonding your mob together and reinforcing the memory of your shared success. You hold court during this period, sitting in your command position while orcs come to you with disputes, requests, and reports. A nob wants permission to raid a nearby settlement. You grant it, because why not? More loot is always good. Two boys are fighting over a piece of salvage. You rule in favor of whichever one seems stronger, or just take the salvage for yourself if it's particularly valuable. A mech wants resources to build a new weapon. You assess his proposal and either approve it or tell him to make do with what he has. These audiences are informal and chaotic, but they serve a crucial purpose. They remind everyone that you're the final authority, that your word is law, that all decisions flow through you. They also give you insight into the mood of your mob. Are the boys happy with their loot? Are there brewing conflicts that need to be addressed before they become serious? Are there opportunities you're missing? You also think about the future. This victory was satisfying, but it's just one victory. What's next? Do you consolidate your position here, fortifying this newly conquered territory and using it as a base for further operations? Do you immediately push forward to the next target, maintaining momentum while your mob is still excited from this win? Do you use your enhanced reputation to recruit even more orcs, building towards something bigger? These strategic considerations are influenced by the Gestalt field. You can feel the psychic pressure of your mob, sense their collective mood and desires. They want more fights. They want bigger challenges. They want to be part of something legendary. If you try to settle down, if you suggest consolidating and resting, they'll get restless. Bored orcs are dangerous orcs, and a bored warboss is even more dangerous because other orcs will start wondering if maybe it's time for new leadership. So you make the decision to keep moving. You'll take a few days to loot this area thoroughly, repair your equipment, and integrate your new recruits. Then you'll push forward to the next target. Maybe it's another Imperial world. Maybe it's a Xenos stronghold. Maybe it's a rival orc tribe that's gotten too big for its own good. Whatever it is, it needs to be significant enough to keep your mob engaged and satisfied. The aftermath of victory also brings opportunities for advancement within your organization. Nobs who distinguish themselves in battle might get promoted to commanding larger mobs. Boys who showed exceptional prowess might get elevated to nob status. Mech boys who created particularly effective weapons might get more resources and better positions. These promotions aren't formalized with ceremonies or paperwork. They just happen organically, as you recognize valuable orcs and give them more responsibility. You also eliminate problems during this period. Nobs who performed poorly in battle might find themselves demoted or killed. Orcs who looted when they should have been fighting get punished. Gretchen who were too slow or too disobedient get fed to the squigs. This culling serves to keep your mob lean and effective, removing weak elements and reinforcing that success is rewarded and failure is fatal. As the days pass and the celebration winds down, your mob gradually transitions from celebration mode back to war mode. The hangovers fade. The fights become more serious, as orcs remember that they need to stay sharp. The mech boys finish their projects and present you with new weapons and vehicles. Everything slowly aligns toward the next objective, the next battle, the next opportunity to prove orc superiority. You stand one evening overlooking your camp, watching thousands of orcs going about their business. This is your army, your mob, your tribe. These are the orcs who've chosen to follow you, who believe you'll lead them to the best fights in the galaxy. The responsibility of leadership sits heavy on your shoulders, but it's a weight you welcome, because being a warboss isn't just about personal glory or individual achievement. It's about being the focal point for all these violent, aggressive, barely controllable greenskins, channeling their energy toward productive destruction rather than letting them tear themselves apart. You think about where you've come from and where you're going. You started as just another boy, no different from thousands of others. Through violence, cunning, and sheer refusal to die, you've climbed to the top of the orc hierarchy. You've won battles that should have been impossible. You've killed enemies that should have killed you. You've grown from a regular orc to a massive, terrifying monument to orc warfare. And you're not done yet. Not even close. Because victory isn't an ending. Victory is just the setup for the next fight, the next challenge, the next opportunity to prove yourself. The loot you've collected will be used to equip your boys for future battles. The reputation you've gained will attract more followers, making your mob even more dangerous. The growth you've experienced will make you more formidable in combat. Everything feeds into the cycle of violence that defines orc existence. Tomorrow, or next week, or whenever you decide the time is right, you'll lead your mob into battle again. You'll point them at another enemy, roar another war cry, and crash into another defensive line with overwhelming force. And you'll win again, because that's what you do. That's what warbosses do. They fight, they win, they loot, and then they do it all over again. This is the life you've chosen. Or perhaps more accurately, the life that chose you when your genetic coding marked you for potential greatness. It's violent, dangerous, and exhausting. But it's also exhilarating, satisfying, and exactly what you were designed for. You're not meant to build civilizations, or create art, or pursue knowledge. You're meant to fight. And in that role, you excel beyond what any other species could manage. The spoils of victory are sweet, but they're just fuel for the next campaign. The rest and celebration are necessary, but they're just preparation for the next battle. Everything in orc life circles back to the fundamental truth. The strong survive, the weak die, and the successful get even stronger. You are strong, you are successful, and you intend to keep it that way for as long as possible. The price of power, threats, and challenges. Being at the top of the orc hierarchy doesn't mean you're safe. If anything, it means the opposite. Your position as Warboss makes you a target for every ambitious orc who thinks they might be able to take what you have. The bigger your reputation, the more attractive you become to challengers who want to prove themselves by defeating you. Success doesn't buy you security. Success buys you more dangerous enemies. The threats come from multiple directions, each requiring constant vigilance and immediate responses. Internal challenges are the most common. Every day, multiple orcs think about whether they could beat you in a fight. Most of them wisely decide they can't and keep their ambitions in check. But some, driven by overconfidence, ambition, or simple stupidity, decide to try. You deal with these challenges through overwhelming violence, making examples that remind everyone else why challenging you is a bad idea. Your nobs are both your greatest assets and your greatest threats. You need them to command your mobs and enforce your orders, but they're also the orcs most capable of actually challenging your position. The relationship is symbiotic but tense. You reward them for success and punish them for failure, but you also watch them constantly for signs of brewing rebellion. A nob who's getting too big, who's winning too many victories, who's starting to attract too much loyalty from his boys, that's a nob who might soon become a problem. You manage this threat through a combination of strategies. You keep your most powerful nobs competing with each other, directing their ambition toward mutual rivalry rather than toward you. You rotate assignments so no nob becomes too entrenched in any particular position. You make sure to regularly demonstrate your superiority in combat, reminding them through personal violence why you're the boss. And when necessary, you simply kill nobs who've become too powerful or too ambitious, replacing them with younger, less confident orcs. Rival warbosses are another constant threat. Other orc leaders see your success and want to take it from you. Maybe they want your territory, your loot, or your reputation. Maybe they're just bored and think fighting you would be fun. Maybe they've been hired by external forces to eliminate you. Whatever their motivation, they're constantly probing your defenses, testing your strength, looking for opportunities to strike. These conflicts between warbosses can range from small skirmishes to full-scale wars. Sometimes it's just posturing, two warbosses trading insults and minor raids without committing to serious combat. Other times, it escalates into massive battles where entire tribes clash, leaving thousands dead and the landscape scarred by violence. You can't avoid these conflicts entirely. Other warbosses are too aggressive and too numerous, but you can manage them through a combination of strength, reputation, and occasional alliances of convenience. External enemies pose different but equally serious threats. The Imperium sends specialized forces to eliminate successful warbosses, recognizing that decapitating orc leadership is one of the few effective ways to disrupt orc military operations. Space Marine strike teams specifically target warbosses, attempting to kill you through surgical strikes rather than fighting your entire mob. Inquisitors coordinate campaigns designed to isolate and eliminate you. Imperial assassins might be deployed with the specific mission of putting a bullet in your head. These threats require different responses than internal challenges. You can't just beat up an Imperial assassin in a public challenge. You need to actually survive assassination attempts, which means maintaining security around your person, being paranoid about potential threats, and never falling into predictable patterns. You sleep in different locations. You vary your routines. You keep your most trusted nobs close as bodyguards. Even then, you're not entirely safe. The Imperium has resources and dedication that make them persistently dangerous. Other Xeno species also target successful warbosses. Eldar sometimes manipulate events to eliminate orc leaders they see as threats to their plans. Tau might coordinate strikes against warbosses whose mobs threaten Tau expansion. Even Tyranids, in their instinctive way, seem to focus additional resources on eliminating orc leadership when they encounter particularly organized resistance. Everyone recognizes that killing the warboss is the fastest way to disrupt orc operations. Age and injury slowly accumulate despite orc regenerative abilities. Every battle leaves scars. Every fight causes damage that doesn't fully heal. Over time, these injuries add up. Your movements become slightly slower. Your reactions become fractionally delayed. Your stamina decreases incrementally. These changes are so gradual that you barely notice them yourself. But they're there, slowly eroding your physical advantages. This natural decline is what eventually catches up with all warbosses. You can't maintain peak physical condition forever. Eventually, inevitably, you reach a point where younger, stronger orcs start to match your abilities. When that happens, when the physical gap narrows, your position becomes vulnerable. This is why most warbosses don't die of old age. They die in challenges, beaten by younger orcs who've grown strong enough to take what the old boss can no longer defend. You also face threats to your reputation. In orc society, reputation is power. If you suffer a major defeat, if you retreat from a fight, if you show weakness or fear, word spreads quickly through the Gestalt field. Other orcs sense the shift in your psychic presence, the diminishment of your authority. This encourages challenges, as ambitious orcs recognize that you might be vulnerable. A single defeat can cascade into a crisis of legitimacy that ends with you fighting for your life against multiple challengers. Maintaining your position requires constant success, but the definition of success keeps escalating. Early in your career as Warboss, winning battles against minor enemies was sufficient, but as your reputation grows, expectations grow with it. Your boys expect bigger victories, more impressive conquests, better loot. What would have been celebrated as a major success a few years ago might now be seen as merely adequate. You're constantly raising the bar for yourself, needing ever more impressive achievements to maintain your status. This creates an exhausting treadmill where you can never truly rest. Every victory just raises expectations for the next one. Every conquest just makes your followers hungry for bigger targets. You're trapped in a cycle of escalating ambition, always needing to find the next fight, the next challenge, the next opportunity to prove that you're still the biggest and the baddest. The psychological pressure is immense. Though orcs don't really think about psychology, you're constantly on edge, always watching for threats, never able to fully relax. Trust is a foreign concept. Any orc around you might be planning to challenge you. Any apparent ally might be positioning themselves to betray you. You maintain your dominance through violence and intimidation, but those tools require constant application. The moment you show weakness, the moment you let your guard down, that's when the knives come out. Some warbosses respond to these pressures by becoming increasingly paranoid and violent. They kill nobs preemptively, seeing threats everywhere. They launch ever more reckless campaigns, trying to maintain momentum through constant action. They surround themselves with bodyguards and isolate themselves from their own tribes. These strategies sometimes work in the short term, but often accelerate the warboss's downfall by alienating their followers. Other warbosses try to manage the pressure through delegation, building strong command structures and trusting their nobs to handle more responsibilities. This can extend their reign by reducing their personal burden, but it also creates power bases that might eventually challenge their authority. There's no perfect solution. Every strategy has trade-offs, and every trade-off creates new vulnerabilities. The truly great warbosses, the legendary ones who manage to hold power for decades and achieve historically significant conquests, do so through a combination of exceptional combat prowess, unusual cunning, and often just incredible luck. Gaz Kolthrucker survived numerous assassination attempts, defeated countless challengers, and managed to unite orc tribes on a scale rarely seen. But even he faced constant threats, constant challenges, constant pressure to maintain his position through continuous success. The price of power for a warboss is eternal vigilance and endless violence. You can't coast on past achievements. You can't take breaks to rest and recover. You can't build institutional structures that would survive your death. Your power is entirely personal, derived from your individual strength and success, and it evaporates the moment you can no longer enforce it. This creates a system where most warbosses have relatively short reigns, burning brightly for a few years before being overtaken by younger, stronger rivals. You accept these terms because you have no choice. This is the nature of orc leadership. This is the price you pay for being at the top. The constant danger, the endless challenges, the perpetual need to prove yourself, all of it comes with the territory. But you accept it because the alternative, being a subordinate, being weak, being one of the masses rather than the boss, is unthinkable. You'd rather die fighting to maintain your position than live as just another orc. And so you continue, day after day, challenge after challenge, threat after threat. You beat down rivals. You survive assassination attempts. You win battles. You kill enemies. You prove, again and again and again, that you deserve to be the boss. Because the moment you stop proving it, the moment you fail to meet a challenge or lose a crucial fight, that's when your reign ends. That's when someone else takes your position, claims your gear, and becomes the new boss. This knowledge drives you forward, pushes you to ever greater achievements, prevents you from ever truly resting. The price of power is constant struggle, but you pay it willingly because power, for an orc, is the only thing that matters. Power means good fights, good loot, and good times. Power means being remembered, at least until your successor inevitably crushes your skull and takes what's yours. Power means living the life you were designed for, being the biggest and the baddest, standing at the top of the orc hierarchy and daring anyone to try and take it from you. It's exhausting, dangerous, and ultimately probably going to get you killed. But while it lasts, while you're still on top, while you're still the boss, it's exactly what you want to be. Legends. The greatest warbosses. In the long, violent history of the orcs, a few warbosses stand out as truly legendary. These are the greenskins whose names are known across the galaxy, whose conquests changed the course of history, whose very existence struck fear into the hearts of their enemies. Understanding these legends helps understand what it means to truly excel as a warboss, to achieve something beyond just local dominance, and create a legacy that outlasts your inevitable violent death. Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Thraka stands as perhaps the greatest orc warboss of the 41st millennium. His story embodies everything about orc leadership taken to its absolute extreme. He started as a lowly boy, completely unremarkable, except for one catastrophic injury. A Space Marine bolter round destroyed 30% of his skull and pulped a significant portion of his brain. The notorious pain boy Mad Doc Grotznik rebuilt his skull with adamantium, and somehow this injury activated latent psychic powers that convinced Ghazghkull he was in direct communication with the orc gods Gork and Mork. Whether or not the gods actually spoke to him is irrelevant. What matters is that Ghazghkull believed it, and his absolute conviction gave him a psychological edge that other warbosses lacked. He claimed to be the prophet of the Green Crusade, chosen by the gods themselves to unite all orcs and conquer the galaxy. This wasn't just ambition. This was religious certainty backed by genuine psychic phenomenon that other orcs could sense through the Gestalt field. Within 6 years of his injury, Ghazghkull rose from boy to warboss. He did this through the standard combination of violence and success, but he had an unusual advantage: strategic cunning that exceeded what most orcs possessed. He could plan ahead, anticipate enemy responses, and coordinate complex operations, where other warbosses just pointed their mobs at the enemy and hoped for the best. Ghazghkull actually strategized. He used tactics. He set traps. He exploited enemy weaknesses with a sophistication that seemed impossible for an orc. His first major test came when Urk's sun began to die and a massive space hulk appeared in orbit. Ghazghkull saw opportunity where others saw only crisis. He systematically subjugated every other tribe on Urk, uniting them under his banner through a combination of force, cunning, and the compelling argument that following him was their only chance of survival. He led them onto the Space Hulk, renamed it World Killer, and set sail into the warp. The journey through warp space should have destroyed his fledgling crusade. The Hulk's power systems failed multiple times. Daemonic entities attacked constantly, trying to slaughter the orcs or corrupt them. But Ghazghkull held his forces together through pure force of will, turning each daemonic attack into a training exercise that hardened his warriors. By the time the Hulk emerged in the Armageddon system, Ghazghkull commanded a battle-tested, unified force, ready to conquer. The Second War for Armageddon established Ghazghkull's reputation across the Imperium. He wasn't just another warboss leading a tribal raid. He was conducting an organized invasion with strategic objectives. His forces moved with uncharacteristic coordination. His attacks exploited Imperial weaknesses with precision, that suggested actual intelligence gathering. He even spoke fluent Low Gothic, unusual for an orc, which allowed him to understand intercepted Imperial communications and anticipate enemy responses. The Imperium responded with overwhelming force. Multiple Space Marine chapters, entire Imperial Guard armies, and a massive naval presence converged on Armageddon to stop the Green Tide. The campaign lasted years, transforming the planet into a hell of endless war. Cities became battlegrounds. Industrial sectors became fortresses. Entire hive cities fell to the orc assault, and the Imperium's generals despaired of ever stopping the invasion. But Ghazkul's greatest adversary wasn't the Imperial military. It was Commissar Sebastian Yarrick, an aging but brilliant Imperial Guard commander who understood orcs better than most humans. Yarrick fought Ghazkul to a standstill, using tactics specifically designed to exploit orc psychology. He turned orc aggression against itself, set traps that even cunning orcs fell into, and gradually ground down the invasion through attrition and superior logistics. The conflict between Ghazkul and Yarrick became legendary on both sides. Ghazkul respected Yarrick's fighting spirit, seeing him as a worthy opponent. When Ghazkul eventually left Armageddon to pursue larger goals, Yarrick followed, dedicating his remaining years to hunting the Warboss across the stars. Their rivalry embodied the eternal conflict between Orc and Imperium. Two forces locked in eternal combat. Neither could truly win. 57 years after the Second War for Armageddon, Ghazkul returned for the Third War. His forces were even larger, his tactics even more sophisticated. He had spent decades building his power base, conquering worlds, uniting tribes, growing in both physical size and psychic presence. By this point, Ghazkul had become truly massive, requiring custom mega armor just to contain his enormous frame. He wasn't just a warboss anymore. He was a living legend, a figure of mythic proportions whose very name sent shivers through Imperial commanders. The Third War for Armageddon exceeded even the second in scope and destruction. The planet became a permanent war zone where conflict never truly ended. But Ghazkul had evolved beyond caring about individual planetary conquests. He was playing a larger game, using Armageddon as a recruiting ground and proving ground, while his attention focused on the bigger goal, uniting all orcs everywhere into a single, galaxy-spanning crusade. Currently, in the dying years of the 41st Millennium, Ghazkul continues his mission. He travels the galaxy, subjugating other warbosses and adding their forces to his own. He's creating something unprecedented in orc history, a truly unified green tide that spans multiple sectors and includes millions of warriors. The gestalt field around his forces has grown so powerful that it's visible to psychers as a green wave of psychic energy, drawing in more orcs from across the galaxy. Other legendary warbosses each made their own marks on history. Nazdreg Ug Erdgrub became famous for his unusual wealth and cunning. He commands a massive space hulk, possibly with some degree of control over its warp travel, allowing him to appear seemingly at random to strike Imperial targets. He speaks fluent Low Gothic and uses both punishment and rewards to manage his slaves, demonstrating sophistication unusual for orcs. His forces have laid waste to at least 11 Imperial worlds, and every attempt to stop him has failed. Tusker Daemon Killer earned his legend by doing what most sane beings would consider impossible, invading the Eye of Terror and fighting daemons on their home ground. His crusade carved through several daemon worlds before crashing on a flesh planet belonging to a daemon prince of Khorne. In the final battle, Tusker died, killing the daemon prince, but his death was so spectacular that Khorne himself was impressed. The Blood God resurrects Tusker and his entire mob every day, allowing them to fight and die in eternal battle, which is literally paradise from an orc perspective. These legends share common characteristics. They were all unusually large, even by Warboss standards. They all possessed exceptional combat prowess, combined with strategic cunning. They all achieved victories on a scale that went beyond typical orc raids, and they all became focal points for the Gestalt field, drawing orcs to them through sheer psychic presence. But they also shared the same vulnerabilities all warbosses face. They were constantly challenged by ambitious subordinates. They faced assassination attempts from Imperial forces. They risked losing control of their mobs if they went too long without victories. The difference was that they navigated these challenges better than most, surviving longer and achieving more before their inevitable falls. Understanding these legends is important for any warboss because they represent the pinnacle of what's possible. They show that orcs, despite their apparent simplicity, can achieve strategic brilliance when properly led. They demonstrate that the Gestalt field, when properly harnessed, can accomplish truly remarkable things. They prove that orc leadership, when executed at the highest level, can threaten entire sectors and force the Imperium to commit massive resources to counter the Green Tide. They also serve as cautionary tales. Every legendary warboss ultimately faces the same fate: death in battle, betrayal by subordinates, or gradual decline as age and injury catch up with them. The difference between legendary warbosses and ordinary ones isn't that they escape this fate. It's that they achieve so much before it catches up with them that their names outlive their bodies. As a warboss, these legends inspire you to greater achievements while simultaneously reminding you of the limitations of individual power. You can become legendary. You can unite tribes, conquer worlds, and make your name feared across the galaxy, but you'll never be truly immortal. Eventually, someone bigger and stronger will take what you've built. Eventually, your reign will end in violence, as all orc reigns do. The question isn't whether you'll fall. The question is what you achieve before you fall, and whether your achievements will be significant enough that orcs remember your name after you're gone. That's the real measure of a legendary warboss. Not how long you survive, but how big you loom in the collective memory of your species. Conclusion. The eternal green struggle. Standing on this pile of corpses, surrounded by your roaring boys, covered in blood that's mostly not yours, you understand the fundamental truth of being an orc warboss. This is what you were made for. Not politics, not administration, not building lasting civilizations. Violence. Pure, unfiltered, glorious violence directed at anything that isn't green. And at the center of that violence, channeling it, directing it, embodying it, stands you. Being a warboss is simultaneously the simplest and most complicated role in the galaxy. Simple because the rules are clear. Be the biggest, be the meanest, win fights, take loot, repeat until death. There's no ambiguity, no moral complexity, no need for nuanced decision-making. You see a problem, you hit it until it stops being a problem. You want something, you take it. Someone challenges you, you beat them. It's primal leadership reduced to its most fundamental form. But it's also complicated because maintaining your position requires constant awareness of threats from every direction. You're simultaneously managing internal politics between your nobs, external threats from other warbosses and enemy species, the logistics of keeping thousands of violent greenskins pointed in the right direction, and your own gradual decline as age and injury accumulate. You're performing a juggling act where all the balls are on fire and will explode if you drop them. The life expectancy of a warboss isn't long. Most don't survive more than a few years before someone bigger and stronger takes their position. The constant challenges, the endless battles, the perpetual need to prove yourself, all of it combines to ensure that warboss positions turn over regularly. You're not building a dynasty that will last generations. You're having a brief, violent party that ends when someone kills you and takes your stuff. But what a party it is. Every day brings new challenges, new fights, new opportunities to prove your superiority. Every victory adds to your legend, making you physically bigger and psychically stronger. Every enemy you crush validates your existence and justifies your position. You're not slowly decaying in some palace, growing soft and weak while bureaucrats handle the actual work. You're fighting constantly, staying sharp through necessity, maintaining your edge, because losing it means death. The appeal of being a warboss is obvious to any orc. Power, glory, the best loot, the best fights, the adoration of your boys, and the fear of your enemies. You stand at the pinnacle of orc society, the ultimate expression of everything your species values. You're not just strong, you're the strongest. You're not just successful, you're the most successful. You're the orc that other orcs aspire to become. But the cost is equally obvious. Constant danger, perpetual challenges, the certainty that you'll eventually fall, and the knowledge that when you do fall, you'll be immediately forgotten as your successor takes everything you built. There's no retirement plan for warbosses, no peaceful end after a life well lived. You fight until you die, and then someone else takes your place, and the cycle continues. The galaxy at large views orc warbosses as disasters waiting to happen. When a particularly successful warboss emerges, Imperial strategists immediately begin planning how to eliminate them before they can unite too many tribes. Space Marine chapters dedicate resources to hunting down dangerous warbosses. Inquisitors coordinate efforts to prevent the emergence of another Gazkul-level threat. The entire Imperium recognizes that orc warbosses, when properly supported by their mobs, represent existential threats to human worlds. And they're right to be afraid. A warboss leading a united crusade can devastate entire sectors. The Green Tide, when properly organized and pointed at Imperial worlds, can overwhelm defenses that would stop most other threats. Orcs don't need complex supply lines or careful logistics. They don't worry about casualties or strategic depth. They just keep coming, wave after wave of green violence that crashes against defensive lines until something breaks. But from the inside, from the perspective of the warboss leading that tide, it's not about strategic objectives or resource acquisition. It's about fighting because fighting is fun. It's about winning because winning makes you bigger and stronger. It's about crushing enemies because crushing enemies is what orcs do. The strategic implications that terrify Imperial commanders are just side effects of orcs doing what comes naturally. This is perhaps the most alien aspect of orc psychology from a human perspective. They're not fighting for ideology or resources or territory, at least not primarily. They fight because they were genetically programmed by the old ones to be living weapons, designed to survive in the most hostile environment imaginable and fight forever. The fact that this makes them a galactic threat is incidental. They're not trying to conquer the galaxy. They're just trying to find good fights. And conquest happens to be a reliable way to find opponents worth fighting. As a warboss, you embody this philosophy completely. You're not building an empire. You're not trying to leave a lasting legacy. You're not concerned with how history will remember you. You're fighting because fighting is what you do, and you're leading because you're too strong for anyone to stop you. The moment someone stronger emerges, they'll take your place. And that's fine. That's how it's supposed to work. Might makes right, and the strong rule until they're not strong enough anymore. This creates a paradox where the most successful warbosses are simultaneously the most celebrated and the most temporary. Gazkul's achievements are legendary, but his reign will eventually end just like every other warboss's reign. The only question is when and how, not whether. Even the greatest warboss is still just an orc, subject to the same brutal natural selection that governs all orc society. But that's also what makes being a warboss so appealing. You're not carrying the weight of eternal responsibility. You're not trying to build something that will outlast you. You're just being the best orc you can be, for as long as you can be it. When your time ends, when someone bigger and stronger takes you down, at least you'll die doing what you love, fighting. And really, for an orc, what could be better than that? You're not meant to die of old age in some comfortable bed. You're meant to die in battle, preferably taking several enemies with you, adding one last victory to your record before someone else gets to claim they beat you. That's the orc way. That's the warboss way. Live violently, fight constantly, and when death comes, meet it with the same aggression you brought to everything else. This is what it's like to be a warboss in Warhammer 40K. It's brutal, chaotic, dangerous, and absolutely perfect for an orc. You wake up every day ready to fight. You go to sleep every night having fought. And everything in between is spent preparing for more fighting, celebrating, past fighting, or actually fighting. It's the purest possible existence, stripped of everything, except violence, and the hierarchy established through violence. So, if you enjoyed this deep dive into the green-skinned nightmare that is an orc warboss, Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. There's plenty more Warhammer 40K lore to explore, and we're just getting started on the various Xeno species that make the 41st Millennium such a spectacularly dangerous place. Drop a comment, letting me know what faction you'd like to see covered next. Until then, remember, might makes right, and the strong rule until someone stronger comes along. That's not just orc philosophy. In the grim darkness of the far future, it's the only philosophy that matters.